Chapter 1042. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Mayor. Is this really going to work? Letting two outsiders be the leader and the saintess, Yu stood outside the door and listened to what they thought was a safe conversation. The kind elder who wanted to meet his relatives during the day and had arranged everything. At this moment, his expression was solemn, and there was no lack of gloominess. We have to do it even if it doesn't work. The real leader and the saintess died a long time ago from practicing evil techniques. Do you want everyone to know that the 100 Spirits sect is actually an evil sect? Then what about the benefits we received in the name of the 100 Spirits sect? Are we going to return them all? As the conversation went on, the quarrel became more and more intense. As time gradually passed, Yu learned a lot of things from them. The leader and the saintess of the 100 Spirits sect died from chi deviation while practicing evil technique. Before they suffered chi deviation, they went into seclusion every day. They wholeheartedly wanted to improve their strength. The reason why the 100 Spirits sect was established so carelessly. It was also the result of the mayor's arrangements. After that, the two of them often went into seclusion and didn't care about anything. It was as if he had taken over all the power. He took over everything and recruited a lot of believers. In the end, he gained countless benefits. Anyway, the leader and the saintess didn't care about anything. He just needed to use their names. But not long ago, the two of them died from chi deviation. After that, he was about to lose his main source of income. Their corpses were extremely hideous because of chi deviation and couldn't see the light of day. Because the two of them often went into seclusion, not many people knew them. As a result, it was so easy and convenient to change dynasties now. The hearts of the people were not what they used to be. It was hard to imagine such a kind and trustworthy elder. He actually established an evil sect. And the things he did were also extremely terrifying. He actually used the offerings of these ordinary people to scheme for himself. Yu even sensed the smell of human blood on him. The real person who practiced evil techniques was probably the mayor. How trustworthy could his words be? He was just a big liar from the beginning to the end. According to you, how should we deal with this matter? It was rare for Xuelon to want to participate in these things. She didn't like to participate in these things. Because to her, participating in it was basically a waste of time. But now, because of a different understanding of the world, he had become much more optimistic than before. At the very least, he was no longer icy cold, as if he was a block of ice in front of outsiders. Instead, he had his own emotions, although they were relatively shallow. Of course, this was a further tempering of his mental state. He didn't really change his personality in an instant. In essence, she was still the original Xuelon. Let's leave this matter alone for now. Don't you want to know what they're up to? Xuelon was a little confused. She really couldn't guess what these people wanted to do. Looking for outsiders was obviously not a long-term solution. Sooner or later they would be exposed. Since it wasn't a long-term plan, why would the mayor do this? If it was for the sake of being open and aboveboard, in order to arrange the identities of the sect master and the holy maiden, they could find ordinary people to temporarily replace them. At worst, he could just dress up a little and appear in front of others occasionally. Why did he have to drag the others along with him? Furthermore, he was a complete stranger to her, yet he wasn't afraid that she would be threatened. He wasn't afraid that everything would be exposed one day. Of course he's not afraid. Although his words are extravagant, he has already thought about how to get rid of the stumbling block in his heart. It doesn't matter who is the sect master and the holy maiden. The most important thing is that he needs the sect master and the holy maiden to leave the public sight in a reasonable way. In that way, he can sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. He can justifiably become a tyrant. It involved too many people's hearts. Originally, she thought that a person could have so many faces. He was kind and amiable in front of ordinary people. He was honest and trustworthy in front of people who also knew his background. There was also the ruthless and poisonous scorpion hiding in the deepest dark. A person who had so many faces and didn't change them back and forth didn't find it tiring. Xuelon said her thoughts like this. If one had great strength, there was no need to do these fancy things. Just looking at it was already very tiring. But for some people with low strength, they wanted to have power, to have status, and to get everything that they envied. They needed to use such a complicated method. The reason was naturally because they weren't strong enough. They wanted to get those things that shouldn't belong to them. Suddenly, someone stepped on a leaf. However, the leaf that fell on the ground was already a little stiff. When one foot stepped on it, it made a very subtle cracking sound. Such a subtle sound was extremely obvious in the dark night. A fierce light flashed in the mayor's eyes. He rushed out quickly, but no one saw it. We must find out who came here. Focus on the two people who just came. Recently, there are also some people who are very restless. They always want to get to the bottom of it. Dig out all these people and get rid of them. We'd rather not leave any of them alive and make a mess. When the time comes, we can casually find a reason to shirk the responsibility. Then, no one will suspect us. Speaking of which, that leaf really wasn't stepped on by Qin Yu and Xuelon. It was someone else. An agile fatty kept shuttling back and forth. He barely crawled out of the tunnel that had been dug long ago. Before he could take 2 breaths, he felt a shadow on his body. He turned his head slightly stiffly. When he saw that it was Qin Yu and the others, his heart was slightly relieved. I heard what that old guy said. You were innocently involved. You're not in cahoots with him. This guy is too evil. So many people in the village believe him, but I just don't. I think there must be a problem. Where did so much powerful holy water come from? Those who drank the holy water all turned into monsters, and they still firmly believe it. The little fatty really didn't seem to have any vigilance. He kept talking to himself and looked very relaxed. Suddenly, he disappeared in the blink of an eye. From the beginning to the end, Qin Yu didn't feel the slightest bit surprised. From the beginning, he knew that the little fatty wasn't a simple person. Otherwise, how could he escape so quickly in such a short time? And he also cleaned up all the traces that he left behind. It was enough to show that he was a meticulous person. It was impossible for him to talk to himself in front of strangers without any vigilance and even show his back. If he really did that, it could only mean that he deliberately showed weakness and had other intentions. The little fatty still couldn't escape. Since Qin Yu had seen through it, he wouldn't give him a chance to escape. There were still some questions that hadn't been asked. About the holy water and what happened in this town. Chapter 1043. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Little fatty didn't know much. Most of it was just his speculation. After all, the mayor didn't want anyone to have something on him. So he was extremely cautious when doing things. Other than himself, no one could be sure if he had done those things. According to Little Fatty's narration, he felt that the mayor might have planned the deaths of the previous leader and holy maiden. After all, he had always wanted to monopolize the power. It seemed very possible when he thought about it. But after thinking about it carefully, he knew that this matter didn't make sense. The mayor was a smart person. Since he was a smart person, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing. If he had done this, he wouldn't have been in a hurry to find a substitute. He even found someone who he didn't know the background of. It could be revealed that everything he said was false at any time. It was the same even if he had a lot of prestige. If it was a stranger he found casually. If he directly destroyed everything he had done, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. But in the end, he still did it. And Little Fatty said that it was possible that the mayor had killed the previous leader. This was slightly possible, but it was also possible after thinking about it carefully. There were also many things that didn't make sense. The mayor wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Because he knew that even if the two people died, as long as they didn't die openly, it would be troublesome for him. He would find a way to let these people die honorably and honorably. When the time came, as long as they showed their faces and died in an accident, wouldn't it be more honorable? And not like now, he was suspected by Little Fatty for no reason. In summary, it could only mean that Little Fatty wasn't telling the truth at all. He didn't say a word of truth from beginning to end. Everything he said was out of mistrust. After all, they were strangers and outsiders, and they were directly arranged to replace the leader's position. It was also possible that people would think that they were in cahoots with the mayor. Qin Yu didn't explain to him. After hearing all this, he didn't let Little Fatty leave. Little Fatty was an agile fatty. He was very soft and gentle, and his body was as slippery as if he was smeared with oil. It was difficult to catch him. But this was nothing to Qin Yu. He directly tied him with 3 or 4 layers of rope. No matter how slippery he was, he couldn't get through. He definitely couldn't run away. His size was there. Want to run? It would definitely cause some commotion. Little Fatty lowered his head, as if he had nothing to live for. In the end, he was reluctantly pulled back. The room where the leader and holy maiden stayed was It wasn't a big deal for dozens of people to stay. Fatty was thrown to the ground. Xuelon poured a cup of hot water for Qin Yu. She chatted with him intermittently, and she completely leaving Little Fatty to the back of Little Fatty. Originally, Little Fatty should have been Fatty. But now, he was translation especially, he translation, until dawn translation Qin Yu and Xuelon did not show any signs of fatigue the entire time. They Fatty translation, their translation, as if. Little Fatty little translation. His strength wasn't high, and he had been on guard all night. It was inevitable that he was a little dispirited. It was obvious that he didn't sleep well at night. But there were threats everywhere around him. He also had to worry about whether he would be killed immediately. He really couldn't sleep well. Not to mention a good night's sleep. He couldn't wait to find a pillar and knock himself out. But the other end of the rope was always in Qin Yu's hands. If he made any movements, Qin Yu would be able to sense it immediately. After trying to slip away several times without success, Little Fatty translation had to give up. He couldn't slip away, nor could he run away. He couldn't even knock himself out by knocking himself into something. He could only beg for help. He hoped that Qin Yu would let him go. But at this moment, he still didn't tell the truth. Although he was begging for mercy, he really couldn't hold on anymore. He didn't think about whether he could exchange his life for the truth. Although the mayor isn't a good person, how can you prove that you're not a bad person? There's a lot of double-crossing. If you don't tell the truth, you can stay in this room forever. After waiting for so many days, Little Fatty knew that every room was cleaned at a fixed time. If he stayed in this room forever, he would be discovered sooner or later. And the clothes he was wearing were the same ones he wore last night. One look and one could tell that he was an assassin or a spy. When the time came, he would definitely end up badly. He had seen the mayor's methods from afar. His methods were extremely vicious. In comparison, Qin Yu was better. He just tied him here, but didn't immediately take his life. He didn't torture him either. After weighing the pros and cons, Little Fatty decided to reveal everything in one breath. He was indeed not a good person, but he wasn't bad either. He didn't double-cross. He came here purely to make a fortune and didn't have any other ideas. He felt that something was wrong when he came here. Originally, he just thought that this cult had some power. But after investigating, he found that this cult was run by some people. Perhaps the cult leader did have some ability. But the real consul didn't have much ability. If he exposed it and collected enough evidence, it would be enough to make people afraid. If the mayor didn't want his reputation to be tarnished and become a rat hated by everyone, He had no choice but to give him a sum of money to keep his mouth shut. This was also an unspoken rule. What he wanted was this sum of money to keep his mouth shut. Of course, he was also prepared to risk his life to spread the news after he got the money. It was none of his business how many people believed it. He just did the best he could and had a clear conscience. And he also got a lot of money from it. He could run to another place and change his name and still live a carefree life. There was no need to hang himself on such a tree. No matter how flustered and exasperated the mayor was, he couldn't protect himself. By the time the mayor finished dealing with everything, he would have disappeared without a trace. He didn't have to worry about being discovered one day. He was worried that he would be caught one day. That's really just what I think. I've never done anything that's against reason and nature. You two heroes, please be magnanimous and let me go. At most, I promise that I won't appear here again. I'll leave far away and get out of here as soon as possible. Little Fatty Translation had traveled extensively and thought of many things. Qin Yu is so powerful that he was able to control him effortlessly. He was also very confident about the mayor. He thought of some conspiracy. Chapter 1044. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. But soon, he shivered again. It would do him no good to continue thinking about it. It was better to pretend to be deaf and dumb. He could still make a living under Qin Yu. The little fatty looked at Qin Yu eagerly, hoping to see her nod gently. But what awaited him was only a piece of worn-out linen. This piece of worn-out linen was under the bed. He didn't know what it was used for. It looked worn out, and there were a few drops of dried blood on it. It definitely smelled bad. Covered his face just like that. The little fatty couldn't catch his breath and fainted. Even if he had thought about whether he should knock himself out. That way, he wouldn't have to suffer and bear so much pressure. But he didn't expect that he would faint in this way. When he slowly woke up, it was pitch black in front of his eyes. The sky was already bright, and many people were coming in a line. There was a long line, and they were holding all kinds of tools for washing up. There were also many people standing outside waiting for orders. It seemed to be a very big battle. The only person in this small town who could be so generous was the mayor. If it wasn't for the previous incident, he would have suspected the mayor's intentions. But now he understood that the mayor was doing this to raise the position of the leader. By then, he would naturally be able to get more. If he raised the position of the leader, he would replace the leader. Then, wouldn't he be the one enjoying all this now? How disgusting. Xuelon could tell what he was thinking this time. But it didn't mean that she would understand. This kind of action made her feel disgusted. Although she still watched with a calm attitude. She couldn't help but want to express her opinion. If she didn't want to know what the mayor wanted to do now. The two of them were definitely not that calm. The combined strength of the two of them was enough to easily destroy this small town. Qin Yu alone could wipe out and suppress, and no one could fight back. With great strength, there was nothing to be afraid of, because everything was under control. Not long after, the mayor came over. Seeing that they didn't use these, the people sent to wash them were a little surprised. There was even a hint of fear in his eyes. But after what happened last night, Xuelon knew what kind of person he was. It was precisely because everything was done perfectly on the surface. She felt a little more disgusted. If he did so well on the surface, why didn't he go to a drama troupe? Maybe he could be famous all over the world. The mayor still didn't know that he had been exposed. Now he saw that they had been here the whole time. And no one saw them to translation. Maybe he was thinking too much. It was possible that it wasn't these two people who heard his words. Or, how could they be so? If it were those who did good chivalrous translation last night, they would have pointed their weapons last night. If it was someone with ulterior motives, they wouldn't have been so calm. More or less, it was time for him to reveal some of his feelings. But until now they didn't. After thinking about it for a while, He felt that he was probably overthinking things. Was translation, and the smile on his face also became slightly more sincere. However, his sincerity was treated as hypocrisy. He didn't say anything to him. The mayor was happy that he didn't say anything. Anyway, these people were all in his plan. They would all die soon. Even if they didn't die, as long as he got them far away. Then he could become the local overlord here. As long as they were dead in the eyes of others. With the passage of time, he might be able to develop a huge force. When the time came, he would expand one after another. As long as he could live that long, he would definitely be able to see his most glorious moment. As he thought, the smile on his face became more and more arrogant. This arrogance was a little obvious. Even if she didn't hear what he said last night, she could roughly guess it by looking at his expression. This person definitely had bad intentions, but now that she knew everything, she couldn't be bothered to do anything to him. Now, if the source of all this was the mayor, then it was fine. She would deal with the people and catch all the small fish and shrimps in one fell swoop. There would be no such scourge. The mayor of an ordinary small town could really have such ambition. Wasn't there some other reason behind this? You said that I'm the leader. Then do you know my name? The mayor didn't panic at all. Perhaps he had already thought of an excuse one day. So the moment he heard this question, he immediately blurted it out. Of course, it's the leader of the 100 Spirits sect. How can we be qualified to know the leader's real name? We only know that the leader's name is 100 Spirit. I know. The leader wants to test me. But I have long remembered the leader's name in my heart. I don't want to ask for the last time. I only hope that the leader can see my sincerity one day and give me some attention. His words were completely watertight. No one could find any fault with them. If he mentioned other details, he could also use the same words. He could vaguely muddle through. But what he said made their status even higher. These mysterious and unfathomable words made it seem like they were really the leader of the 100 Spirits sect. They had single-handedly created the 100 Spirits sect. They were the mysterious experts who came from a mysterious place. No one knew their origins. They only knew that they were powerful, and they would bring endless vitality to countless people and all life in the world. And a bright future. If it was someone with a weak mind, they would probably be fooled by this. He really thought that he was the leader of the 100 Spirits sect. He enjoyed everything that belonged to the leader with a clear conscience. There was no problem with the mayor's attitude. There was no problem with everyone's attitude. He wouldn't guess if he was in danger. Instead, he was dazzled by everything in front of him. It was a pity that the person standing here now was Chinyu. The little fatty spent a lot of effort to barely escape. This was also the reason why Chinyu was able to walk relatively far. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. It wasn't easy for him to escape. He couldn't wait to run out. However, on the other side, Chinyu had immediately sensed the information that the rope had sent back. He had already escaped, but there were still many mysteries surrounding this person. Why did he come here? Why did he suddenly decide to extort the mayor? Whether or not he knew anything more, all of this needed to be considered. So this person couldn't escape. At least, he couldn't escape now. The little fatty ran far away. In the blink of an eye, he found himself back. Chapter 1045. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. How could this be? I've already walked far away, why did I turn back? He even rubbed his eyes in disbelief, not daring to believe what he was seeing. But no matter how he looked at it, this was the room he had been trapped in for a long time. And he didn't even go out the door. The little fatty ran out again in disbelief. But he ran far, far away. In the blink of an eye, he came back again. He immediately widened his eyes. I knew it, I knew he wouldn't be unprepared. Because he's already gone, but he still left behind such a method. making it impossible for me to escape. Really, although he said so, he was very afraid in his heart. But with such strength, it was more than enough to kill as many of him as he wanted. There might be some inexplicable method to make him tell the truth. Now he finally understood. The treatment he received before was indeed very mild. Perhaps it was because Qin Yu didn't want to do anything to him. Otherwise, how could he continue to stand here unscathed and not be beheaded long ago? After all, he really had no value. He had basically said everything he could say. At least for most people. He was already worthless. He had no value at all. He was an existence that could be thrown out at any time. Leaving him behind would be a hidden danger. Because if he ran away, he might say something about Qin Yu. But Qin Yu didn't kill him. This was already a mercy. But the little fatty was still a little unwilling to give up and was prepared to go out and try. If he could run away this time, then he would quickly find a place to hide. The farther away from here, the better. So as to avoid provoking the fiend Qin Yu again. If he found himself still standing in the same place in the blink of an eye, then he might as well not run. There was no point in continuing to run. Why did he keep running? Anyway, he couldn't run away no matter what. Success or failure would only depend on this time. If he could succeed, of course, it would be excellent. If he couldn't, then he would accept his fate. I'll do what I need to do and sit here obediently, waiting for Qin Yu to come back. He did not know whether or not Qin Yu could hear what was happening here. Therefore, he had been talking to himself the entire time. It looked as if he had lost his mind. But in fact, he knew that he was really worried that Qin Yu had some special means to monitor him. That was why he said those words. But after saying that, there was no movement. He could only do as he said and give it a try. This time, he carefully avoided everyone and even crawled through the dog hole. He ended up in a very sorry state and then he walked outside for a long time. This time, he didn't return for a long time. He couldn't help but feel that he had seen hope. Did that mean that he didn't have to go back this time? If he could escape from this place unscathed, he must thank God and wash his hands of the golden basin after the rain. He would never do something so immoral again. He would no longer do anything like domestic violence, rape, and extortion. Just be an ordinary person. That way, he would have fewer troubles. Just as he stood outside the city proudly and was about to laugh, suddenly, he couldn't laugh anymore. Because everything in front of him had returned to how it was at the beginning. He was back again, and this time, it was still very clear. It was as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. He finally felt that there was something wrong with the hallucination. So everything that happened just now was just an illusion? But he felt that it wasn't as simple as an illusion. The little fatty looked at his body, and the marks that should have been there were still there. It was as if he had suddenly been saved. When Qin Yu came back, he saw a meatball with a face full of despair. The little fatty was indeed very fat, and he looked like a big meatball. No matter where he sat, he looked like a small mountain. At this moment, he curled himself into a ball and looked even more funny. But such a funny appearance couldn't hide his cunning. And his flexibility. The first impression that the fatty's body left on people was that it was cumbersome. But what he was best at was flexibility. Using his appearance to hide his true strength was the most natural disguise. Qin Yu had already checked his body, and there were no traces of modification. In other words, he had always looked like this. He could be flexible and changeable, and his personality was extremely cunning. There must be something wrong with this person's background, at least it wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. I'll give you one last chance to tell me what you're doing here. I'm just a passerby, and I'm not interested in getting involved in your affairs, I just want to know the cause and effect. The little fatty was still a little unwilling to give up. He thought for a long time and felt that it should be an illusion, but now he was standing on Qin Yu's side again. He felt that this was definitely not an illusion. After checking his surroundings again, he still couldn't see anything. He made up his mind and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to break out. He didn't believe that he would still be affected by the illusion if he ran out. But Qin Yu suddenly raised his voice a little. Although it was still extremely calm, there was a hidden threat. The little fatty suddenly felt as if he was tied up by iron chains. He couldn't move at all. But there were no iron chains on his body at all, and only he felt this way. It couldn't help but remind him of before. He clearly felt that he had escaped safely. But he still felt the sense of despair in this room. This was no longer something that could be described simply as an illusion. Even the most realistic illusion definitely couldn't achieve such an effect. It was usually designed in advance. But even if someone was controlling it, it couldn't be so precise. Not a single trace of feeling was wrong. It was as if he was really tied up by heavy iron chains. I said that I heard a group of people talking about this time, so I came over. Actually, I'm also a gambler, and I squandered all the money on me in one go, so I had no choice but to do this business, which is also my old profession. If you ask me, I'm not that kind of a very bad person, I'm just taking some of the benefits from these bad people. The little fatty was still defending himself at this moment. No matter how harmless he looked on the outside, it couldn't hide that he was not a simple person in essence. Just as Qin Yu guessed, the little fatty's purpose of coming here was not simple. Or it could be said that the reason was deliberately controlled by someone. As for little fatty, he was only here to pay off his gambling debt. That was why he was here. And also to make more money. Chapter 1046. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A sharp dagger appeared in the dark. On the little fatty's face, there was still a gentle and harmless fawning expression. Can you let me go? Look at me like this, it's very uncomfortable. Now that I've been caught by you, it's obvious that I don't have any ability to escape. Why are you unwilling to let me go? I promise that I won't run away easily. I'll listen to you obediently. Qin Yu didn't believe his words at all, and casually caused the pressure on him to become heavier. The little fatty didn't expect that his superb deception would fail. His face was ashen as he was pressed to the ground. This time, he really couldn't move. It was very strenuous for him to speak. At this time, he didn't even want to speak. Once he spoke, he would drain the remaining strength in his body. What the little fatty said should be true this time. Of course, the little fatty didn't have his own thoughts. For example, he wanted to extort more money. This way, he could get more things. However, these were all trivial matters that didn't affect the big picture. What was the person behind the scenes planning? A small town on the edge wasn't very prosperous. Why would it be specially targeted? It seemed that it was done deliberately, as if they were specifically targeting this town. And they were putting in a lot of effort to do something. It was just that some people couldn't understand what exactly they wanted to do to make things so complicated. He could even create a short-lived cult master and a multi-faced mayor with eccentric thoughts. Was it all for the sake of extorting a sum of money from the mayor? Things were definitely not that simple. And to solve all these mysteries, they had to start with the little fatty. One-Eyed hadn't appeared for a long time. After he appeared, he had long wanted to show off his skills. It wasn't easy for him to find someone to play with. Of course, he was extremely excited. He directly began to set up one illusion after another. There were all kinds of torture instruments that One-Eyed knew, as well as all kinds of punishments. There were also all kinds of extremely realistic murals on the side. Beside each torture instrument was an extremely realistic picture. When the little fatty saw it, he cried out in fright. But that strange gravity was still on his body, and he couldn't retreat. He only felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. It pressed him down until he couldn't breathe. He just needed to be a little heavier. He would be crushed into a pile of meat paste. At this moment, He saw so many terrifying torture instruments. Naturally, he said whatever he wanted to say in one breath. Even the little things that he had done when he was 3 years old were revealed. However, what Qin Yu was concerned about was naturally not these, but the mysterious person. He seemed to have asked little Fatty to steal something. He also seemed to be very cautious, only saying where that thing was. What's more, he said something inexplicable. He said that as long as the mayor heard the message he sent over, he would immediately hand over the thing that the mysterious man wanted. As for why he was so certain, little Fatty had no idea at all. He just cried and shouted, tears flowing from his nose everywhere. If he were to move his hand again, he would immediately pee. One-Eyed was a little embarrassed to continue playing. The feeling of ending things before they even started was really uncomfortable. After the little Fatty got out of the illusion, his face was still covered in a mixture of snot and tears. He looked very, very pathetic. However, he couldn't care less right now. He just felt that he had finally escaped from that place and escaped from death. He was also a little more in awe and fear of Qin Yu. He didn't dare to imagine it at all. What should he do if he really did experience it? And now he knew that it was probably just an illusion. It also meant that even if he experienced a life worse than death, after coming back there would still be no harm. She did not suffer any physical pain from either her body or her lower body. He would just keep feeling pain. It was just like when he felt that he was being pressed down, but there was nothing on his body. The two principles were the same, but he didn't want it at all. He felt so many torture instruments falling on his body. He didn't want to try all of them. What do you want to know? I'll tell you everything. Please don't put me in that place again. I don't want to go back to that damn place anymore. Please spare my life, even if I have to work for you. He didn't want to feel so much pain in the endless reincarnation. That was definitely a life worse than death. Don't let him know who did this. Although Qin Yu was powerful, he didn't look like the kind of person who would set up so many torture instruments on him. Qin Yu didn't see how One-Eyed interrogated him just now. At this moment, the little Fatty's attitude was really strange. He was a little interested, so he asked. He also knew about those torture instruments and those terrifying scenes just now. He couldn't help but feel some sympathy. However, if such a person wanted to sympathize with him, he might take advantage of him. As long as you're honest, you should know why you went through such a thing. After a while, the little Fatty naturally knew why he had gone through such a painful thing again. Because he didn't tell the truth before. Since he didn't tell the truth before, he naturally had to endure the pain now. Otherwise, how could he tell the truth? Qin Yu was very smart. He realized that he didn't tell the truth just now. Even if what he said was basically half true and half false, he still couldn't deceive anyone. After understanding this, he immediately swore that what he said this time was absolutely true. There was no exaggeration at all. If it was really fake this time, then he would let him experience the cruel torture instruments that he saw just now. If he really lied or even bragged, he could be punished. He only hoped that after the investigation, he wouldn't do anything to him. I'm not interested in killing people, as long as you're honest. Continue to stay here. Do you have any objections? The little Fatty shook his head like a rattledrum. Of course, he didn't dare to have any objections. Even if he stayed here, he might not be able to escape. But even if he couldn't escape, it was better than facing those torture instruments. Anyway, it was impossible for Qin Yu not to come back. He could roughly guess what Qin Yu was going to do. He would just stay here obediently. In any case, it wouldn't be long before he would be released. He was so sure, so he was even more obedient and casually found the most inconspicuous corner to squat down. He only hoped that he wouldn't be noticed. It didn't matter whether he ran or not. He only hoped that he wouldn't suffer so much that it was worse than death. Thinking about it, a gambler wasn't a strong-willed person. It was impossible for him to endure so much pain. Chapter 1047. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The mayor felt that everything was under his control. Although there was a small accident earlier, he didn't take what happened last night to heart. Suddenly, someone kicked open the door, and the originally very sturdy door was easily shattered. It broke into countless pieces. The dust flew to the mayor's face, choking him until he couldn't breathe. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw a blurry figure. He finally figured out who the man was. After figuring it out, he felt that his back was much straighter. Although he still had to show a good attitude on the surface, but since his plan was already in motion, he had no choice. He felt that he would definitely be the final winner. So it's Lord Sect Leader. May I know why Lord Sect Leader is here this time? If there's nothing extremely important, Lord Sect Leader can just send someone to inform me. He was already at death's door, but he was still acting like a sect leader in front of him. Qin Yu laughed disdainfully and continued to play along with him. Su Fonglin, do you know your crime? Su Fonglin was the mayor. At this moment, his expression was extremely ugly. He couldn't believe that he was being called by his name. Originally, everything was going according to his plan. But now, it seemed that there were some mistakes in the plan. However, facing the questioning of this fake sect leader, Su Fonglin finally chose to endure for the time being. At least now was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. I don't know what I did wrong. Sect leader, can you tell me clearly what I did wrong? If that's the case, I can correct myself. Everyone needs a chance to correct their mistake. I don't know how I accidentally offended Lord Sect Leader. His words were also meant to protect him. However, he had forgotten that his previous appearance had been too perfect. So much so that the person that everyone really respected was the sect leader of the 100 Spirits sect, not him. And the current sect leader wasn't them yet. So his words attracted some criticism. Many people felt that he was a little insensible. How could he speak to the sect leader directly like this? This tone and attitude was wrong. Therefore, many people began to persuade the familiar and amiable old mayor. Be nicer to the sect leader. Then, he admitted his mistake honestly. When the time came, the sect leader naturally wouldn't wrong any good person. From the beginning to the end, Qin Yu only said one sentence, but the turn was very fast. Originally, Su Fonglin felt that everything was under his control. But now, such an unforeseen event. Everything that he did before was because he was shooting himself in the foot. At this moment, it was not easy for him to explain that all of this was just an act. There was no such thing as a sect master. So, he could only pen those words. But in his heart, he snorted disdainfully and didn't seem to care at all. However, someone in the crowd suddenly pointed out the disdain he had shown just now. His expression was that on his expression. Was his expression. Now, there was someone now, the crowd. Now. As is translation, is translation? Even translation, even the his translation, was that translation, as sect translation, Su Mayor translation mayor, it translation. Although it might make him feel better, there was no place for him to do it now. There were gossips everywhere. Everyone was pointing at him and gossiping. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He stopped everyone with a roar. You people are really a bunch of idiots. The one in front of you is not the sect leader at all. The real sect leader and holy maiden are dead. They are all dead. After saying that, he looked at the crowd in disbelief. His eyes widened. It seemed that he was hit by this heavy news. Finally, he felt the pent-up anger in his heart loosen a little. Sure enough, these people didn't get along with him. When he reached the highest position, he would completely control all the power. Let's see how these people fawned over him. Didn't they just want to curry favor with the strong? Each of them looked down on him. Many people couldn't believe it, but Mayor Su Fonglin was the only one who had contact with the sect leader. Previously, they had only felt the sect leader's divine power, but they had never seen the sect leader and holy maiden. Without seeing their faces, there was no way to judge the two people in front of them. Were they the sect leader and holy maiden they knew? The crowd began to talk, but Qin Yu said 3 words to the mayor unhurriedly. 20 years. The mayor's expression immediately changed. He couldn't believe it. He gritted his teeth. He didn't expect that after 20 years, someone would still come to find him. And coincidentally, the person he was targeting now was the person who came to find him. In this case, things were a little tricky. He definitely couldn't afford to offend the person behind the scenes. However, he was not willing to swallow his anger just like that for Qin Yu. In the end, after much consideration, he decided to choose a compromise. I was angry just now. I was confused. My memory has been a little bad recently. However, no one believed his words. Bad memory? Then he could still be alive and kicking these few days. Soon, someone in the crowd stood out. Some time ago, the mayor was very good at settling accounts. He was able to recite everything that the cult master had done like the back of his hand. Some things were so trivial that no one could remember them, but he remembered them clearly. And Su Fonglin was the person with the best memory in the whole town. It had been like this since he was young. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the mayor. He didn't expect that one day he would lie to people like this. No one was willing to believe it, but the few people who were close to Su Fonglin. They were also the few people who knew the inside story. One by one, they helped to calm down everyone's emotions. No matter what the truth was, at least now they couldn't continue to talk about this matter. Su Fonglin's mood seemed a little strange. There should be something they didn't know. In fact, Su Fonglin had single-handedly raised the entire 100 Spirits sect. In a short period of time, the 100 Spirits sect, which was unknown. It had developed to the point that the people in the town believed it without a doubt. All the people who doubted it soon turned into loyal believers. They didn't know how Su Fonglin did it, but it didn't stop them from following Su Fonglin's orders, because only in this way could they get the various benefits that Su Fonglin had promised them. But Su Fonglin also had a headache. In the end, he could only take the risk and bring Qin Yu into the secret room. This place could isolate all sounds and was suitable for talking about important matters. Chapter 1048. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A few jade-colored dice fell with a crackling sound. On the table covered with a red cloth, it rolled into a ball in a muddle-headed mess. Don't tell me that fatty can disappear into thin air? I asked you to keep an eye on a person, and you gave me the news that a person has gone missing. I spent so much money to invite all of you here. Are you all just here to eat? The people standing at the side didn't dare to speak, because they knew how terrifying the young man in front of them was, although he looked a little sickly pale. But that was only because he didn't see the sun all year round. In fact, this was the master of the underground city. The world didn't know that the cities above ground were incomparably prosperous. But above ground, there was an even safer and more chaotic and violent underground city. This underground city didn't see the sun all day long. But almighty people had set up a device similar to the sun and the moon. Suddenly living here, people really couldn't tell the difference between the underground city and the surface city. But the underground city was still the underground city. The people who lived in the underground city all year round were all pale and bloodless. But the strength of the underground city couldn't be underestimated. This was the famous young city lord, who had long been regarded as a scourge by many people. Although he was young, he already had the demeanor of his father. He was vicious and merciless, and had done many things in secret. If he was dissatisfied with anything, he would make a move on others. He used the pain of others to make himself happy. Of course, occasionally he would make some deals with some greedy people above ground, as long as they were fated to find one of the countless keepsakes he had left behind. They would be able to contact him for a short period of time. Then, they would get an insignificant item from him. Of course, this wasn't a big deal to him. But those who asked for his help, after receiving what he gave them, all of them had soared to success. But every item that was lent out had an agreement. How long he lent it out completely depended on his mood. It could be 2 or 3 years, or it could be 20 or 30 years. If they could win his favor, he would casually give out a few people who could contact him for a long time. He didn't care if he could get back the things he lent out. "I beg you, please let me go. That's all I know." Although he had some status back then, his father didn't die. His brother was on top of him. In the end, even if he was a member of the mayor's family, there was no way he could inherit the mayor's position. At that time, he would only become one of the countless ordinary people. Even if he could live a carefree life, he could only be an ordinary person after all. How could he accept this? When he was young, he was much smarter than his older brother. In his opinion, he was just not lucky enough to be the first to be born. If he was the only one left, if he could get rid of his father and brother who were in the way, after that, he would be able to sit in the position of mayor. When he became the mayor, he could do whatever he wanted. He could do whatever he wanted. No one could interfere with his decisions. Because of this, he made a deal with the human bone that came from the underground city. After all, he didn't have anything good on him. Although it was a loan, it wasn't for free. Instead, he was going to use the rest of his life. It would be fine if he could provide an extremely valuable item when the time came. If he couldn't, he would be captured and brought back to the underground city. He would forever be a slave that could die at any time for the young city lord. Originally, the mayor's willpower was a bit stronger than Fatty's. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so ruthless as to kill his own blood relatives back then. But since the crisis was right in front of him, the time limit was up. He had no other choice. If Chin-Yu hadn't suddenly mentioned the 20-year agreement to him, he was about to completely throw this matter to the back of his mind. Therefore, he casually threatened and tempted him to reveal everything. "What did you borrow back then? Since he had to return it, it must be something that could be reused. No matter what kind of artifact it was or what kind of thing it was. But since he had to return it, at least it still existed now." The mayor hesitated. Although he was willing to tell everything, it was just a formality. He wasn't willing to reveal his biggest secret in one go. Extremely unwilling emotions. When he saw Chin-Yu's cold gaze, it was as if he was looking at a dead person. It completely disappeared without a trace. Between death and telling everything, he was naturally willing to choose the latter and not the former. Chin-Yu wanted to use this to hone his state of mind, so he was interested in exploring the so-called cause and effect. Although it didn't take him 2 days, such a result was really unexpected. It actually implicated the so-called underground city. This underground city didn't know good and evil. But to be able to do such a thing, at least the young city lord wasn't a decent person. At least, he was an evil person who liked to take other people's lives for fun. But in this way, the little fatty owed so many gambling debt. He had no choice but to go back to his old profession. Someone must have deliberately designed it. Otherwise, how could there be so many coincidences in this world? It just so happened that he was a slick liar who had long washed his hands of gold and left the underworld and decided not to go back to his old profession. He had no choice but to pick up his old profession that he hadn't done for many years. He pulled the little fatty who was on the other side over. The two of them gathered together and confirmed all kinds of details again. In the end, they found that what the two of them said was exactly the same, and what Chin-Yu guessed was also the truth. "So you're not someone sent by the young city lord?" The mayor regretted it after saying that. It didn't matter whether it was or not. He couldn't protect his own life. Qin Yu was the person who now had the power to kill him. At this moment, it was useless no matter what he said. The little fatty obviously knew what it meant to judge the situation better than he did. Since he also ended up in such a miserable state, he was even more honest and well-behaved. He said whatever he wanted to say and didn't have the spare energy to investigate himself. He also told her everything about the mayor. Su Fonglin was indeed not an honest person. Thinking about it, he could make such a decision 20 years ago. For his own selfish desires, he secretly harmed his family. He wasn't an honest person. At least in the dark, he did a lot of bad things that made countless people angry and resentful. The 100 Spirits sect that he established also did a lot of things. What he did was more to accumulate wealth, and then he was even more unscrupulous. He made other people do a lot of bad things in order to collect this wealth. So if he really counted, he was definitely not an innocent person. His hands were stained with a lot of blood. If you didn't stop me, maybe you could live in peace. Now that your luck is bad, it would be too easy for you to die. Su Fonglin had a bad premonition. Chapter 1049. This matter was quite trivial, and it would take a lot of talking. Qin Yu naturally wouldn't do it himself, and there just happened to be a suitable candidate next to him. The little fatty stood up on his own accord. Now, there was no one more suitable to do this besides him. So in the end, if he didn't know what was good for him and stood up, maybe the illusion from before would reappear. At least now he already understood that it wasn't Qin Yu who did it to him. It was someone else who let him see so many terrifying torture tools. If he made any mistakes, he would be caught. Although he didn't dare to say it out loud for fear of breaking the vases. But he remembered this matter fiercely in his heart. Before Qin Yu left, he would try his best to be obedient. What's more, someone deliberately set up a trap for him behind the scenes to jump into. If it wasn't for someone setting him up, he would still be doing his own thing. How could there be so many messy things? So much so that he was under so much pressure now. Even his impression of Su Fonglin was extremely bad, and he couldn't wait to torture this guy until he was better off dead. Otherwise, how could he calm the anger in his heart? Of course, the little fatty didn't dare to be dissatisfied with Qin Yu in the slightest. But to others, especially the mayor of the town who was related to the culprit, he didn't show any mercy at all. And such a hypocrite was indeed what he hated the most. When he didn't know before, he only knew a part of this guy's face. It already made him feel extremely nauseous. Now that he knew more, it turned out that this guy even killed his father and brother. Just for that little bit of prejudice. But the eldest son should have inherited more, and looking at him like this, Father Su probably knew that he was useless long ago. For such a person, it was better to be mediocre and incompetent all the time. If he really did something wrong, then he would never be able to turn back for the rest of his life. The little fatty thought that he still had a bit of conscience. At least, he definitely wouldn't do such a thing. It was just that he didn't have a family. If he had family, he would definitely worship them well. And he had already washed his hands of it, so he definitely wouldn't get involved in any gambling. He would never do such immoral things. Let's go, let's go. This time, I must let everyone see your true face. Such a sanctimonious person can actually gain the respect of so many people. The world has indeed changed. Qin Yu let them go out together. Little Fatty's single eye had been watching them the whole time. Therefore, nothing would happen. Right now, he was only studying the communication token that Su Fonglin had given him. It was just that this communication token had been used once and had long since become useless. However, Su Fonglin put it aside. He had been keeping it well, although he couldn't see any damage at the moment. However, it was just an ordinary bone. Although these bones were human bones, it was still a little frightening to hear. But in reality, a human bone was just a piece of bone. The only way to contact the young city lord was through a communication array. It was very small. It wasn't too troublesome to create this array formation. However, since it involved the underground city, it wasn't easy to connect. At the very least, it was absolutely impossible for ordinary people to reactivate this small formation. The main reason was that the activation of this formation was made of a very special material. Unfortunately, it was only enough for one use. Without the supplement of that special material, no matter how they tried, they couldn't activate it, unless they could change the details, or use other materials to replace it. However, this was extremely troublesome. Maybe after changing it, it would become an ordinary communication formation, and not something that could connect to the underground city. A special communication formation that connected to the young city lord. If it was someone else, they would take it seriously. There was no way that would work. Qin Yu had countless things in his hands. Some of them came from other places. If the things in Flame World weren't enough, then he would try other things. It was slightly troublesome to try again and again. However, the ancient divine dragon had a wide range of knowledge. Even for these extremely special items, it was impossible for them to obtain them. Even if these things were special, they could easily find a suitable replacement. This way, all the problems would not be problems. The small formation was reactivated. The young city lord looked at his flashing wrist. There was a similar formation carved on it. Carving a communication formation on his body. This was something that very few people dared to try. After all, this was a formation and not a talisman. Once it was carved on, it could not be destroyed. If he wanted to remove this formation, he would have to injure himself. This way, he could not go back on his word, and it was not very useful. Very few people would do it, but the young city lord did it. It could be seen just how willful and reckless he was. If he could even act against himself, there was no one in the world he did not dare to act against. Originally, the underground city was so chaotic without any order. They could do whatever they wanted. Maybe the only order was the coldness between strangers. Not interfering with each other, that was the only rule. Strange, who is finding me this time? I feel that the timing is so unlucky. Because there was no special mark. So he did not know. This time, the one that contacted him was the passage formation that the mayor had once used. He thought that it was a formation that had been spread out that was activated by someone else. This time, someone new contacted them. The young city lord, who was not in a good mood, immediately prepared. No matter who it was this time, they would not have a good expression. They would make him pay a price that was several times higher than usual. Perhaps in this way, he would be able to see a good show. People's greed was unbridled. He made a request, and these people would not choose to give up easily. They would only think about how to meet his request, further to achieve their own goals. Therefore, if they were not willing to pay the price themselves, they would constantly plan from others. This was a very interesting thing. Qianjin Shinran did not dare to delay at all, and quickly began to investigate. According to this communication formation, they could detect the location on the other end of this communication formation. For ordinary people, the range that they could detect was not so large. He couldn't reach his hand into the ground. But if Shinran investigated, the effect would be extraordinary. If it was the place that they were most familiar with, from top to bottom, there was not a single spot that could escape their eyes. Although it was not the place that they were most familiar with, the effect was only slightly weakened. The effect was still very significant. The young city lord was curious about why the person on the other end did not speak for a long time. But he did not know that in such a short time, his secret had been exposed. Chapter 1050. There was no sunlight in the underground city, but at least it looked like a normal city. However, the area was extremely wide, and it was at the center of the entire flame world. As long as he dug down a little more carefully, If they dug a long enough tunnel, they might be able to reach the underground city. But this was only a theoretical possibility. In fact, if they really did that, they would only accidentally dig into other places. The underground city had not been able to stand for so many years just because of what they saw on the surface. They possessed an absolutely powerful world, and had a lot of capital. They were able to establish themselves in the entire flame world. In the flame world, the underground city was a hidden power. But it was one of the biggest factions in the world. People were always worried and afraid of it. Many people did not even know of the existence of the underground city. Those who could appear in the underground city were mostly vicious and evil people. Because there was no way they could continue to stay on the ground safely. So they could only use this method. They had to use this method to reappear in front of people. Otherwise, they would not have any place to stay. Only the underground city was willing to accept them. Furthermore, they had an extremely happy life here. It was not like the surface, which had all kinds of rules. There was basically no order here, and chaos was everywhere. For example, people were buying and selling. Or people were randomly killing people. This place was even more chaotic than the arena. At a glance, it looked like a slaughterhouse and was filled with oppression. But in this environment there was a group of people who could live like fish in water. Because of the chaos here, they were not forced to a dead end. In reality, most people were not willing to come here. Who did not want to have light? In this underground, they could only be a rat in the trench that could not see the light. People with some pride were not willing to be a rat in the trench. But when they were forced, there would still be many people who would madly escape in. On this day, a few new people came in through unknown means. Some people would come in because of all kinds of mistakes. Some people thought of all kinds of methods. Only then could they find the entrance to the city. They used all kinds of methods to prove that they were willing to give up everything on the surface. His identity was open and aboveboard, and everything that he owned was open and aboveboard. Give up everything. Only then could they enter the underground city. He wanted to start a new life. A small number of them were brought in by others. The people who were brought in were all slaves. There was no room for resistance. As long as the master willed it, it could die at any time. Therefore, these people had no rights at all, and no one cared about them. Xuelon couldn't bear to see the chaos here. Their methods were too cruel. In order to reduce his competitors, and also to prevent himself from being retaliated by the rising slaves one day. Most of the slaves and weaklings had their hands and feet cut off. Most of his strength had been crippled. It only pointed to ordinary people who were slightly stronger. This way, they would never have the chance to attack their master. There were also some who were rendered mute, blind, or deaf by the poison. There were too many things like this to count. Because there was no order in the underground city. As long as a slave could kill his master, he would have the qualifications to become his own master. Originally, this rule wasn't very clear. Instead, it was an unspoken rule that had always been hidden in the dark. But not long ago, there were several cases of slaves killing their masters. In the end, he inherited everything that belonged to his master. Those slaves who still had some strength began to have thoughts. And as a master, as long as he didn't want to see this scene, he had to try his best to stop all this. For example, he would attack the slaves next to him and cripple most of their strength. In this way, he wouldn't have to worry about threats. Since he no longer had any abilities, what could he use to become the master? Only then could he truly rest assured. The place where the city lord lived was extremely prominent. But everyone knew that the city lord had been in seclusion for a long time. Now, the city lord had always been in charge of the city lord. The place where the city lord lived was some distance away from the city lord's mansion. The two places were completely opposite. As a result, the place where the city lord lived now looked extremely desolate. If it weren't for the fact that someone often cleaned it, it would have been forgotten and become a dilapidated place. But very few people knew that the city lord spent half of his time in the city lord's mansion every day, instead of staying in his city lord's mansion. Tracking over, Qin Yu came to the front of this courtyard. He didn't take the main road, but jumped over the wall. The door had been locked, and it was obvious that no one had entered or exited for many days. There were a few small doors next to it, but the distance was too far and he had to go around it. And that was the door that the slaves occasionally cleaned for special access. It was indeed very short. It was more convenient to go in and out than to jump over the wall directly. The city lord only felt that there was a slight change. His strength had also reached a terrifying level, although he didn't completely have the final say in the city. But he also held most of the rights. In addition, his father had left some capable subordinates for him, plus the useful people that he had cultivated himself. It was also very impressive. But now someone dared to break into the city lord's mansion. The city lord smiled and began to search. He wasn't in a hurry. In this underground city, he had always had great ability. As long as the person was still in this city, sooner or later, he would find out. It didn't matter when he would be found out. At this moment, although he was looking everywhere, he also paid attention to the movement behind him. A vigilant person like him, he would never expose his back to outsiders without any defense. He cared more about whether his back would be attacked, and he didn't care about where was more suitable to hide people around. But just as he was paying attention to his back, he didn't notice that there were two more people in front of him. Originally, he thought that there should be another plan to come here. Seeing him, they would either run away or assassinate him directly. But he didn't expect Qin Yu to stand in front of him openly. When I didn't see you, I thought what kind of person you were. But I'm just a gloomy person who can't be seen in public. The city lord was most annoyed by what people said about him. He had climbed to his current position by himself, step by step. He paid a lot to get to his current position. So he had always hoped that he could grasp all the rights as soon as possible. If he had everything in his hands, then he wouldn't have to be afraid of anything. Even if the city lord appeared alive, he was not qualified to compete with him. Chapter 1051. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. This person was the beginning of everything. And something similar to that small town. There were many people like Su Fonglin. He didn't know how many there were. Perhaps even the young city lord himself didn't know. How many things had he loaned out? And how much had he promised to collect in return? There was no accurate number. Even he himself couldn't remember how many there were. What are you doing here? I don't remember there being such a powerful expert in the city. All the experts have to register here. As long as they come in, I will definitely know, and you are definitely not among these people. Tell me, what is your purpose in sneaking into the underground city? The young city lord suddenly became strict and ruthless. Obviously, he wasn't going to let Qin Yu go. An expert who suddenly appeared brought him a lot of danger. Right now, he only had two choices. Either he controlled the person or he killed him directly. Otherwise, it would be a hidden danger to him. This was the best choice. For him. He didn't think there were any other options. But for Qin Yu, there were other choices. Should he kill this gloomy young city lord, or tie him up directly? Should they clear out the entire underground city, or should they leave the underground city alone? Originally, he shouldn't have intervened in this matter. He came because he was curious. He thought that as the young city lord, he could come and see what kind of person he was. If he could exchange a few moves, he might be able to have a clearer understanding of his strength. But this person made him feel a little disappointed. Although your strength is not bad, there is no way to compare with me. From now on, don't interfere in the matters above ground. Continue to expand your underground city peacefully. Although this place is chaotic, it can also be called a paradise. These were all relative terms. For those who had nowhere else to go, this place was a paradise. As long as they could be ruthless and kill themselves, they could get a good life here. Not all of them were vicious and evil. Some might have offended people for other reasons and couldn't survive. So they could only fake their death and think of all kinds of ways to appear. Come to this underground city and start a new life. Of course, the young city lord knew that his actions had been too big recently. It had already attracted a lot of attention. However, he wasn't willing to listen to other people's explanations, even though there were people who kept persuading him to take back the things he had sent out before. All of these communication formations were destroyed. This way there would be no worries at all. But he didn't want to. What's more, Qin Yu had given him an order, so he refused without thinking. However, Qin Yu did not give him the right to refuse. He directly pulled out his saber. If he was unwilling, then he would directly cripple him. There was no young city lord. He wanted to see who else had the guts to do so. Put your hand on the ground. Not to mention the strength of the city lord who was still in seclusion. As long as his opponent was not much stronger than him, he had nothing to fear. Xiantian Senzin's breakthrough had reached the end. He had gone through all kinds of tests, some of which were real and some of which were fake. The immortal beasts that were attracted by the huge commotion kept attacking him. However, he couldn't fight back against these attacks because this was a test. The only thing he could do was to stay there quietly. These powers landed on his body and caused great damage to him. However, as long as the speed of recovery was fast enough, this was just tempering him over and over again. After going through all this tempering, his body had become much stronger. Even passing the test had become slightly easier. However, at this final juncture, it was also the most difficult to resist. Although his strength had increased a little. This time, the divine power that appeared at the end could cause great damage to him. That was something that only a higher realm would have. When one was promoted to the realm of a true god, there would be a trace of divine power in the body. This trace of divine power could be compared to Senzin's full strength by a lot. This was a qualitative change. When he was Senzin, there was a majestic power in his body like the sea. Combined, it couldn't compare to the finger-sized trace of divine power when he was a true god. Success or failure depends on this. If you have the ability, then come down. Xiantian Senzin was no longer prepared to drag it out. If he continued to drag it out according to this method, he didn't know when the divine power attack would slowly descend. He felt that he could still hold on. Even if it all came down in one breath, he was confident that he could pass. There was no need to wait here, so he simply shouted to the sky. He directly provoked this world. Although there was no spirit in heaven and earth, since he shouted, the heavenly Tao had its own rules. Thus, the power of the attack became even stronger. The divine power that had been brewing for a period of time also condensed. It was obviously ready to attack. The divine power that had been brewing for a long time all gathered together. A dazzling white light directly smashed down. The terrifying power within it even shattered the realm of nothingness that had been in the sky all this time. The scene was cut off. No one knew whether he had succeeded or not. And most people in the wind realm, they couldn't help but quickly look in the direction of the previous scene at this time. Originally, they didn't dare to get close, so they had been watching the movements in the sky from afar. They could understand more or less. But now, the scene had all disappeared, and the result hadn't come out yet. They were the closest. Some people had already recognized where that place was. At this moment, they immediately rushed over. But no matter how strong they were, no matter how fast they were, when they arrived, they only found 100,000 mountain range that had been razed to the ground. So many mountain ranges were blasted into slag under that powerful force. It was simply unimaginable that anyone could survive under such terrifying force. But the experts were now circling around this place a few times. But suddenly they stopped, because on the land that was supposed to be scorched earth, seedlings actually began to grow healthily. Although they were only seedlings, one had to know that this was the huge power of tribulation that had just been struck down. It was actually able to produce small seedlings. Not only that, but the seedlings also grew very quickly. It was as if someone had deliberately peeled off the growth speed and increased it 100 times. Not long after, it began to slowly grow. It slowly grew and grew bigger and bigger, and then the speed slowed down. The other places were about the same, but only this one grew the fastest. It also looked the most special. Heavenly tribulation fruit. Could this be the legendary heavenly tribulation fruit? Oh my God, it actually exists. Chapter 1052. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A group of experts were making a big fuss there. They were so excited that they couldn't even bear to touch it. They were afraid that if they moved their fingers, they would break this seemingly fragile seedling. They looked at the treasure of the heaven and earth bell spirit that was still growing. They couldn't bear to break it and just stared at it. They also became wary of the people around them. After all, they discovered it together. Especially the person who discovered it first. This time, his intestines turned green. One had to know that this kind of rare treasure was a treasure that only appeared in legends. Legend had it that it only existed when someone broke through to the true God realm. And when this fruit fully matured, it could increase the success rate of breaking through to the true God realm. One had to know that even if it could only increase it by 10%, it was already an extremely powerful treasure. Moreover, legend had it that this fruit could increase it by 30%. If he could eat a few more, even if his strength would be much weaker if he relied on external items to break through. It was also a good choice. After all, that was a true God. Even the weakest true God would be able to dominate a region. He could come and go freely in the ninefold divine realm. It was even possible for him to become the master of all realms. Xiantian Shenzhen had already left. Even though the divine power had almost killed him, he was still able to control himself. But behind that divine power was a gentle power. As long as he could endure it, the gentle power would arrive later. It directly repaired all the injuries on his body. It also greatly increased his strength. The real heaven's calamity fruit had already been taken away by him. What grew in front of everyone was just an extremely low-grade Earth's calamity fruit. What a bunch of ignorant people! Legend has it that there are only two kinds of fruits that differ by one word, but their appearances are completely different. They actually didn't count carefully. Are the number of stripes on the fruit right? Only those with more stripes have more powerful abilities. Xiantian Shenzhen couldn't be bothered to explain to them. Even if they found that the effect didn't match after eating it, they would probably only think that the legend was wrong and not that they had seen wrongly. After all, the real heaven's calamity fruit hadn't appeared for a long time. In this world, if no one challenged to break through to the true God realm, such a fruit would definitely not appear. But he would keep the real good things for his own people. It happened to bear 3 fruit. At that time, he would give 1 fruit to his disciple and 1 to Xuelan's little girl. It just so happened that he could use it. It couldn't be more suitable. Let me see where Qin Yu has run off to. His strength had already reached true God. Furthermore, the moment he advanced, his strength was already extremely powerful. What he had accumulated over the years, coupled with the fact that he had managed to get through it without any mishap. His current strength was no longer the same as it was in the past. Even if he wanted to appear in another layer of the God realm, it would be a piece of cake. His divine will was able to spread to extremely far places. Even in the void, he had a foothold. It was said that there were existences in the void that were more powerful than true gods. But those were just legends. In any case, he had the strength of a true god. It was no different from possessing extremely powerful strength in a chaotic place like the void. Xiantian Shenzhen was not aimless. His main goal was to find the owner of the giant eye that he had seen by chance before. Since it existed in the void, there should be some traces of it. However, the area of the void was simply too large. With his current strength that had not completely stabilized, it was still a little troublesome to find it. And perhaps he was just unlucky. He had already searched a very large area. He had found an unknown number of void devils with Senzin's strength. All of them were directly destroyed by a strand of divine will. But he just couldn't find a more powerful existence. Someone actually wants to make a move on my disciple. Isn't that overreaching? The young city lord couldn't beat Qin Yu at all. He was easily subdued, and he didn't have the slightest ability to fight back. All he could do was keep panting. Then he kept dodging. Originally, he wanted to find other people, but for some reason, the others didn't seem to be here. That's right. Except for a few people, no one knew that he often appeared here. This place had long become a desolate place because of his deliberate actions. At this moment, no one could discover that he was here. Unless he kept dragging it out like this, dragging it out for a long time. Perhaps someone would be able to find this place, but he couldn't hold on any longer. This is you forcing me to use my final trump card. The young city lord's eyes seemed to be smeared with poison. He looked extremely sinister. Suddenly, the aura on his body became weaker and weaker. But not far away, a luxurious and comfortable room. Suddenly, it was blasted open from the inside and turned into countless fragments. Before he had time to feel heartache, a figure rushed out from inside. And as the figure flew to the sky and fell, the aura rose rapidly. Until the people in the entire city felt great pressure, it still continued. It was just that this aura seemed extremely unstable when it rose. It seemed to be a little intermittent. It rose a little and fell a little. Then it rose again and continued to fall a little. But overall, the aura was still rising. It was very difficult for anyone to detect such a small fluctuation. So this is your trump card. It's just an unfinished product. Looking at the mechanical appearance of this figure, it seemed to be a puppet. Its face was stiff and cold, and it looked somewhat similar to the young city lord. Thinking that this was the city lord's mansion. It was also the place where the city lord cultivated in seclusion. People couldn't help but think of a guess. It seems that this is the so-called city lord. I didn't expect that he would cultivate his father into such a puppet. As far as I know, to make a powerful puppet, it needs to be made directly from a living body. The young city lord's face was even more distorted, but there was a hint of joy in his eyes. This was what he thought was the most perfect piece of work. Although it was just a puppet, however, they possessed great strength and were very agile. When I was making it, it felt so good to see the city lord, who had always been high and mighty, in so much pain that he wanted to kill me. I cut open his stomach in real life, took the top-grade treasure, hung his name, and did it bit by bit. I did every detail for 2 to 3 days. In order to ensure that the wound wouldn't heal again, I had to cut open the wound again every day. It was really troublesome. This person was a complete madman. The process of making a puppet was quite cruel, but he said it was supreme enjoyment. It seemed to be a competition of good wine and delicious food, power and beauty. All of this made people even more fascinated. The city lord of the underground city, who had been refined into a puppet, had reached the strongest strength that Senzin could achieve. This showed the ambition of the young city lord. Chapter 1053. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. An absolutely invincible expert below the true God realm suddenly appeared. It was enough to throw the entire ninefold God realm into chaos for a long time. The young city lord's goal was to cultivate a true God. This plan had been started a long time ago. The candidate was confirmed and he was determined to cultivate in a higher direction. It had something to do with Qin Yu. The commotion caused by Xiantian Senzin's breakthrough was known to the world. Such a breakthrough was closely related to the power of heaven and earth. Everyone could watch part of the process. The young city lord's ambition, which had been hidden in the bottom of his heart, was also aroused by the commotion caused by the breakthrough. He spared no expense to refine the original city lord into the living puppet he was today. The living puppet possessed extremely powerful strength, but the young city lord was originally prepared to let the puppet's strength break through to a higher realm. But because of Qin Yu's sudden appearance and threat to him, he had no choice but to use his strongest trump card. But at this moment, although the puppet's strength was already very high, it did not reach a higher level as he wished. Naturally, he hated Qin Yu, who suddenly appeared and disrupted all his plans. "Since you want to disrupt all my plans so much, then stay here forever. Since you tried your best to come to the underground city, I don't care why you came here. Stay here forever and become another puppet in my hands." This was his biggest secret, and everyone who saw his secret would die without a doubt. Qin Yu suddenly laughed. He laughed because he had too much confidence in his own strength. This kind of blind confidence was not good. Perhaps the city lord's strength was actually very strong. But what was it that gave him such confidence? It made him think that everyone in the world was under his control. It was a little too presumptuous. There were always accidents, and even the slightest accident was not impossible. No one in this world, not even the heavens, had the right to say that everything was foolproof. "Then let's fight. Although I didn't come for you. But you are indeed an opponent." Although it was a little whimsical, the puppet's strength was not to be underestimated. This was a real opponent and also an expert. Although it did not have its own intelligence, its strength had clearly reached the peak. Along the way, he had encountered too few true powerhouses. In the past, with the help of Shinran, he didn't have to worry about his life at all. Naturally, he couldn't find an opponent that could be used to hone his strength. However, this puppet was different. The most important thing was its master. For a puppet that had lost its master, not rebelling was already the best outcome. Therefore, to him this was just training, and not a stumbling block that could block his path forward. The young city lord casually wiped his face, and a few drops of blood accidentally splashed on it. He immediately gave the order to kill them. He was well aware of the puppet he had refined himself. Although he hadn't reached the Deshang level yet, he would definitely obey his orders unconditionally. This was the advantage of puppets. No matter what kind of order he gave, he would execute it without hesitation. They were much better than those who had all kinds of ulterior motive. They were also the most loyal and useful subordinate. The puppet was barehanded, but it was so powerful that every inch of its body could be used as a weapon. He didn't know what the young city lord had added to his body. His whole body was made of copper and iron, and he was invulnerable. Ordinary weapons couldn't leave a trace on the puppet's body at all. Even the powerful dominating heaven blade. It could only exert the effect of a normal weapon. The young city lord narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at the overbearing and fierce blade. Such a good blade is enough to be called a peerless magic weapon. If this blade is in the hands of the puppet, it will be able to exert a greater effect, and let the puppet truly stand at the top of the world. I was still thinking about what kind of weapon should be used for such a powerful puppet. Your appearance with this saber has given me a wonderful idea. The young city lord seemed to be able to see the blade in his hand. But even when fighting with the puppet, Qin Yu was still able to free his hand to give him a blade. This blade wasn't fatal, but it made the young city lord unable to laugh anymore. His face was so gloomy that it seemed to drip ink. Qin Yu didn't care about him. The one who could really be his opponent wasn't the young city lord. It was the puppet in front of him. The puppet's strength was indeed not weak. It could even be said to be at the top of the world. Qin Yu relied on his own strength and weapon to fight to a draw with such a powerful puppet. In fact, He even had a slight advantage over the other party. The young city lord knew that this matter couldn't go on like this. If it continued like this, according to the current trend, Qin Yu would defeat the puppet sooner or later. When that time came, there would be no place for him. If Qin Yu won in the end, he wouldn't be able to live and continue to live his carefree life. He didn't know when, but there was a small crossbow in his hand. The dark green arrows were made from some unknown plant's branches. It looked as if it was full of vitality. But this was the famous 100-withered branch. No matter how strong an expert was, if he was attacked by this 100-withered branch, he wouldn't bleed. But if he bled, he would definitely lose his combat ability. Even after some time, he would directly die. No matter how strong a person was, he couldn't escape. At least in the current situation where there was no true God. The rare poisonous 100-withered branch was one of the most powerful poisons in the world. It was also because of the strength of this poison that many experts joined forces to be able to destroy such a powerful poison. So now there were very few of them left in the world. They were in some large forces. It was also rare to see a little bit of such a powerful poison. The young city lord also searched for a long time before he barely found 3 pieces of 100-withered branch. In the end, he made such a small arrow so that he could use it as a life-saving trump card at a critical moment. Before he could sneak attack, a force that couldn't be ignored gushed out from the side. The powerful impact directly made him hold the crossbow tightly in his hand. He accidentally fell outside. Xuelan's face was like frost, and her temperament was cold and otherworldly. You don't deserve to interfere. If you want to make a move on him, you have to at least get through me first. No matter what, she wouldn't watch someone use such a despicable method to make a move on Qin Yu. His plan had been defeated time and time again. Thinking about it, ever since he met Qin Yu, all of his preparations have been disrupted. He originally thought that the puppet that he had cultivated for a long time had no choice but to appear. With powerful strength, it would definitely be able to help him solve everything in a short time. Chapter 1054. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. But in the end, he didn't achieve the result he wanted. Instead, he was disappointed again and failed again and again. With all his anger added together, the young city lord directly attacked Xuelan. The puppet didn't know any fancy moves, but the power brought by every move was extremely huge. However, Qin Yu, who was fighting against the puppet, was even a level higher. The power that leaked out from the two of them during their fight was extremely terrifying. It could shock the ages and cause a shocking change in heaven and earth. I can even kill a dragon. Let's see if I can kill you. The stronger the enemy's strength, the stronger the fighting spirit in Qin Yu's heart. Naturally, the strength he displayed was also stronger. He was afraid that the enemy's strength was much stronger than his. But he didn't fall into a disadvantage and took advantage of it countless times. Compared to the big and small wounds on the puppet's body and his spotless body, the difference was obvious. But this was still not enough. It was too much of a waste of time. He had to drag it out like this. He didn't know how long it would take. It wasn't rare for a battle between ordinary experts to last for 3 days and 3 nights. If that kind of relationship was familiar and they were at the same level, they would fight and rest. It was even normal for them to fight for 10 days to half a month. But obviously, there were uncertain factors in this underground city. If this continued, it would definitely be disadvantageous. Qian Jin Shinran hadn't appeared because he had been suppressed. The other 2 Shinran naturally felt that it had nothing to do with him. Moreover, Qin Yu only took advantage of it from the beginning to the end and didn't suffer any losses. At the very least, it appeared that Qin Yu would definitely be able to win this battle. It was only a matter of time. But if this continued, the young city lord might have some backup methods. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as calm as it was now. He wasn't in a hurry to find other people. Obviously, he had other plans. Master, do you want me to come out and help you? Although he was only in the state of a young dragon, there was no way to use all his strength. But against a puppet that hadn't reached the realm of a true god, it wasn't a difficult thing. Whenever Shinran attacked, he would cooperate with Qin. It was not difficult to take down the puppet. In less than half a day, they would be able to capture both of them alive and at their disposal. Since this is my own opponent, I naturally don't need you to act. If I didn't pursue strength, why would I prepare to gather the 9 great Shinran? Qin felt as if a fire had ignited in his heart, and it could burn him up at any time. There was actually a faint resonance between heaven and earth. A powerful aura spread out from his body. This aura caused everyone in the underground city to tremble. First, it was the puppet's terrifying aura. It was once again the aura of a breakthrough that Qin was displaying. The entire underground city was in chaos. Everyone was trying to find out who these 2 masters were. Where did this expert come from? They had actually started fighting in the underground city. What surprised everyone even more was that the young city lord did not show up from the beginning to the end. Many people couldn't find the young city lord, so they had no choice but to search the entire city. As soon as he got close to the city lord's mansion, they were directly sent flying by the powerful force. If it weren't for the aftermath of the battle, they would have been killed on the spot. But when they got closer, some people could see the figures fighting in the air. The hidden experts all appeared in shock. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, Qin felt the transformation brought about by the improvement. Now he had improved his strength to Senzin's in one go. He originally had an extremely strong ability. Now he had broken through to this level in one go. It was also a result of his accumulation. Without the previous accumulation, it would be impossible to break through completely in one go. Now we're at the same level. Let's fight again. That's fair. The young city lord had a bad premonition in his heart. Qin, whose strength had not improved to Senzin's, could faintly have the upper hand. Now that he had broken through, wouldn't he be stronger than before? Every time one broke through a major realm, it would bring about a qualitative improvement. The 2 could not be mentioned in the same breath. If Qin broke through at this juncture, he would be the one who had to bear the greatest risk. Ben Shualan was entangled with her and attacked her from a distance. It was just restricting him so that he couldn't do anything secretly. No matter how exasperated he was, he couldn't do anything at this moment. The feeling of powerlessness was really not good, but he couldn't even cut off his means of retreat. The puppet didn't feel anything. Even if it was made into a puppet alive, it only retained its former knowledge and some fighting methods. In the eyes of some people who weren't very familiar with it, this was the city lord being forced to come out of seclusion. Only a small number of his confidants felt a little out of place. Not only did the city lord's strength improve, but he also didn't seem to have much sanity. Maybe this was an illusion, but once it was confirmed that their guess was true, then why did the city lord suddenly lose his sanity? Was there something they didn't know about? Some people turned their attention to the young city lord. If there was anyone who was most likely to know the truth of all this, the young city lord was the first to bear the brunt. After all, he was the one who arranged these things. He was also the one who announced the news that the city lord was in seclusion. Now that it hadn't been a long time, only he could get the truth. These people were speculating, and the discussion didn't stop from beginning to end. The city lord's strength seems to have improved a lot, and it has reached such a terrifying level. Sure enough, there were some breakthroughs in this seclusion. If there were no true gods in the world, with the city lord's current strength, I'm afraid he would be invincible. After Qin Yu's improvement, his attacks were more violent. Even if it was the same move, there was a different feeling when he used it now. Even dominating Heaven Blade began to identify with him more than a little. In the past, He felt that dominating Heaven Blade was just a weapon in his hand. Now, dominating Heaven Blade took the initiative to bow to him. It had truly become a weapon that he could use in his hand. Under this situation, the City Lord's left arm was directly cut off by him. And he was still the same as before, except that the wind was slightly strong, blowing his hair and robe. His body could almost be called meticulous, not to mention a little injury. The City Lord had been refined into a puppet and lost some of his flexibility. He didn't have the qualifications to hurt him at all. At this moment, suddenly, a huge hole opened up. On the other side of the hole, it was dark and chaotic. Breaking through the void, Xiantian Shenzhen rushed over quickly. When he arrived, he saw his disciple's heroic and domineering aura. Chapter 1055. An expert that suddenly appeared. It seemed to make the chaotic situation even more chaotic. Under everyone's gaze, Xiantian Shenzhen slowly walked. But in the blink of an eye, he came next to Qin Yu. "Why didn't you say anything to Master, and came out to train by yourself?" Qin Yu took back his hand, and put aside the puppets that the city master had forged. Xiantian Shenzhen appeared in front of him safe and sound. This meant that his breakthrough was a success. His presence did not seem to have become more terrifying, but his eyes seemed to be able to hold thousands of stars and worlds. When one reached True God, they could hold the rare spacetime of the world. The realms above True God were not accurately divided. It only depended on each person's comprehension level. What they comprehended was time and space, the two most difficult powers to understand in the world. If one wanted to break through True God and reach a higher level, they needed to create a world with life on their own. This was not a little void world. Instead, it was a lively small kiliacosm with unlimited potential for development. If this little world developed into a middle world, their strength would increase again. If they could create a great world with their own power, they could rule over countless middle worlds, flatten the stars and live forever. Shinran of the 9 great essences sought this. But after being silent for a long time, he could not find a chance to break through. His strength was not much different from when he had just broken through. So True God is such a realm. Qin Yu gained 2 more comprehensions in his heart. His strength had once again increased by a small amount. Originally, he had been pursuing the improvement of his mental state. Along the way, he had seen many things happen in Flame World. His understanding of the world had deepened. Now, after hearing Xiantian Celestial Venerable's persuasion, naturally, there was another breakthrough. It seemed very fast, but everything was based on evidence. Xiantian Shenzhen did not conceal his voice. There were also many experts who had rushed over and heard what he said. They were shocked by Shenzhen's strength. On the other hand, he had gained a deeper understanding of his current realm. Hearing these words, Zhang Xian nodded. In the future, if one of them wanted to break through to the True God realm, wouldn't that give him more confidence? Xiantian Shenzhen, who had expected all of this, only smiled and did not explain. These people had nothing to do with him. If they wanted to take advantage of him, then so be it. If it was useful to his disciple, it might not be useful to these people. Qin Yu naturally possessed an extremely high level of talent. He had long reached the point where he should have understood these things, and those people were not that talented. Now, if one wanted to understand the truth of the world that only true gods could understand, this step was a little too big. If no one could set things right for them, they had always believed that what they thought was right. If he really tried to break through to true God, they would only die because they were not prepared enough. Without reaching true divinity and without exceptional talent, his comprehension ability was not enough. Naturally, he could not understand the true meaning of these words. He was also unable to sense the mysteries of the higher realms. The young city lord did not let the puppet stop. The city lord puppet, which had already lost its left arm, continued to charge without any change in expression. even if it had already shed a lot of blood. Half of the robe on its body had already been dyed dark red. Still, its expression did not change as it continued to bury its head and charge. It seemed that it did not even want its life, just to perish together with Chinyu. More and more people felt that something was wrong. Such a selfish and ruthless person like the city lord would definitely not perish together. If it was as usual, the city lord, who had always been able to advance and retreat, was able to yield and stand tall. He would put down his pride and be proud of a true expert. No matter how dissatisfied he was in his heart, he would only stab a knife in the back, and not expose himself in front of everyone like this. This would only let the experts have something on him, so that he would have to pay a huge price. These doubts could not affect the puppet's movements at all. Even if they sensed that something was wrong, the experts in the underground city still chose to bide their time. This expert who suddenly appeared seemed to have reached the true God realm. At least, he was only one step away from the true God realm. However, the city lord's aura now seemed to be extremely powerful and terrifying. At least, he was only one step away from the true God realm. Two super experts who were only one step away from the true God realm gathered together. It was not certain who would win and who would lose. If the city lord won, by then, as a part of the underground city, they would naturally be able to get a share of the loot. If they stood on the wrong side at this time, it would be an extremely bad deal. After analyzing the strengths of each of them, Zhang Xian felt that it was too dangerous. None of these experts were willing to make a move. This time, if they made a move, they would only suffer a huge loss, so they might as well not make a move for the time being. This way, they might be able to choose a side in the end. They might be able to gather a large number of benefits for themselves. Because of this, they did not have the intention to make a move. Xian Tian Shenzhen was extremely disdainful. It was just a puppet. No matter how strong the puppet's strength was, it could only helplessly feel that it was constantly being instigated by others. However, there was still one more interesting thing. Xian Tian Shenzhen's vision was, of course, extremely high. At a glance, he could tell that this puppet was refined by an extremely cruel method. And it was precisely because of this method that it could retain some of the original owner's characteristics. If he wanted to recover his consciousness, although it would be a little troublesome. But it wasn't impossible. Disciple, do you think I should directly kill this guy? If you don't want to kill this guy, then I'll give him a chance to live. A chance to let him regain his consciousness. This time, the young city lord already felt that something was extremely wrong. It seemed that something was far beyond his control. But now, he had no ability to stop all of this. All the attacks were blocked by Xuelan. Xuelan did nothing but stared at him, not letting him secretly make a move. This was already enough for him to drink a pot of wine. The confidence in Xian Tian Shenzhen's tone was too strong. Qin Yu didn't have the slightest doubt. To speak of it, only the young city lord had some grudges with him, and his strength had increased. He could feel that this puppet was refined by the city lord. It was no threat to him at all. With the passage of time, he could definitely win. So the last bit of training was completely useless. You can do whatever you want. It has nothing to do with me. Xian Tian Shenzhen already had an idea in his heart. He directly waved his hand and revealed countless precious materials. But he didn't hesitate to use them on this stranger. It was just to make things more interesting. The young city lord had been forced to the extreme. Fortunately, he still had a trump card that he had been hiding. Chapter 1056. The dark green arrow was thrown out fiercely. As long as such a sharp arrow pierced into the body, even if it was just a light scratch on the skin, it would cause a huge change. Even an expert would not be able to stop it. This poison was famous and could not be resisted. The young city lord's face did not show his success. The profound heaven celestial venerable waved his sleeve, and returned the attack without missing a single bit. All the attacks fell on the young city lord himself. The young city lord was poisoned and only had one breath left. Originally, he thought that he would succeed, but he failed so thoroughly. If the method he used was not so vicious, it would be better. But the method he used was too vicious. And when all of this fell on his head, he felt it. What a hopeless situation this was. Countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures were arranged in an extremely special ratio. The remaining consciousness in the city lord puppet's body was completely outlined, although there was still a part missing. However, he still remembered the scenes before his death very clearly. This part was not important, but he had temporarily forgotten some of the details of his memories. These were not important, and unprecedented. His hatred for his own flesh and blood had reached the peak. There was no absolute kinship in the underground city to begin with. Although he had single-handedly nurtured the young city lord, it was also because the young city lord himself had caught his eye. But he had painstakingly nurtured this little brat. He had actually bitten off a piece of flesh from his body. This was something he could not tolerate. If it were not for the help of an expert this time, he would have to watch himself be controlled by the young city lord forever. He would be treated as a puppet by this ingrate, as a stepping stone to the top. You are really amazing. I have nurtured you for more than 2,000 years, but I did not realize that you were so ruthless in your bones that you could even attack me. The young city lord knew that he would not be able to get through this. He smiled bitterly and said whatever he wanted to say. Since he had already reached this point, he was not worried that he would suffer retribution one day. He was very clear about the power of the poison. There must be no cure. Then why did he still have to be afraid? Anyway, it was just a word of death. So what if he died a more miserable death and didn't even have a corpse left? That's right, I was the one who did it. Furthermore, I've been planning this for more than 500 years. I've gathered an unknown amount of materials before I took action. You should be glad that you have the right to do so, and you are my most perfect creation. If it wasn't for someone suddenly jumping out and interrupting my plan, you wouldn't even have this last bit of consciousness left. Now, the situation was clear. Out of nowhere, some powerful experts jumped out. One after another, they called out City Lord. His attitude towards Xian Tian Shenzhen was even more respectful. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that their attitude towards the City Lord could only be said to be good. However, it was a little perfunctory. However, when it came to the mysterious Sky Shenzhen, it was a genuine attempt to curry favor with him. She wished she could be a peasant that was spurned by others. In any case, as long as he could stay by the side of an expert, it didn't matter whether he was a bumpkin or not. Even the slightest thing revealed by a powerhouse was enough to benefit them for the rest of their lives. Not to mention a true god powerhouse. If they had his guidance, they might be able to go to a higher realm one day to take a look. After all, some of his experience and occasional words and actions, it was enough for them to learn well. They would definitely benefit a lot if they recorded every single move they made. The City Lord took note of this in his heart. However, he didn't dare to show the slightest disrespect towards Xian Tian Shenzhen. Now, he knew his own situation. Although his strength had increased a lot, if it wasn't for Xian Tian Shenzhen awakening his consciousness, he might even have to be reduced to a human-shaped weapon like this for the rest of his life. There might even be many people who would snatch him away. And these experts who appeared later were one of the people who might use him as a weapon. With his intelligence, he could naturally guess that after his matter was exposed, how many people would want to get their hands on such a thing that he wouldn't resist. Moreover, he would be a loyal guard with absolute strength. As long as he could get such a powerhouse as a guard by his side, they would be able to go to some very dangerous places. They would obtain many heaven and earth treasures. And they wouldn't have to worry about being bitten back. And they wouldn't have to worry about being betrayed. There was simply no puppet in this world. Moreover, it was a powerful puppet. It was even more suitable for him. He suffered a pain that was worse than death for a few days and nights. In the end, the city lord still remembered the young city lord and hated him. He turned his head and directly knelt down in front of Qin Yu and Xian Tian Shenzhen. I will never forget the kindness of being reborn. I beg the two of you to help me detoxify the poison in the unfilial wolf cub's body. I am willing to pay any price for it, no matter how strong he looked and how fearless he was. The young city lord also wanted to live a safe and sound life. Now that he saw some hope, he couldn't help but look at Qin Yu with a little hope. But soon, he knew that living was not better than dying. For the current him, dying might be more satisfying than living. But how could he be willing to die? Presumably, as long as he lived, everything that would belong to him in the future. Moreover, he would be able to obtain all of them without leaving a single one behind. But if he gave up his life just like that, perhaps he wouldn't have to suffer those hardships, but he wouldn't have a meteoric rise one day. He would have a chance to become a master again. He could hibernate for so long and plan for so long. In the end, he would pay any price to stand at the top. Now, he could naturally endure humiliation. So even if he knew that it might be better to die, he gritted his teeth and didn't die. Xian Tian Shenzhen was interested. The reason why he paid some price to awaken the last remaining will in the depths of the puppet's heart. Didn't he just think that this matter might be interesting? And it didn't disappoint him. This matter was indeed very interesting. It's not difficult to detoxify it, but the price to pay is not small. And from then on, it will cause irreversible damage to his body. The city lord had made up his mind. Anyway, he wouldn't get a better result now. Since this guy had tortured him to such a state, even if he had to pay the price of his life, he would take revenge. The young city lord already regretted it when he heard about the irreversible damage. But the moment he hesitated just now, he had already missed the best opportunity to commit suicide. Chapter 1057. At this moment, his resistance was unsuccessful. He was directly pressed down by the city lord to Qin Yu's feet. Xiantian Shenzhen made his move. He directly used his most powerful strength. He violently stripped away the traces of poison in the young city lord's body. Of course, such a powerful force had passed through the young city lord's body once. He was basically half a cripple. Although his strength was still there, his realm kept falling. Half of his accumulation over countless years was destroyed just like that. And from then on, he didn't have the ability to continue improving. Although he could be considered an expert in the outside world. But after that, his future was completely destroyed. As a former proud son of heaven, the young city lord didn't dare to admit it. He was also unwilling to accept himself like this. Kill me, kill me! Idiot Shao, have you forgotten how I cut open your flesh inch by inch and drained the blood from your body? Have you forgotten how I used top-notch treasures to keep you alive? I chopped off your limbs and reinstalled special parts for you. I made you become like this, neither human nor ghost, neither dead nor alive. The city lord was indeed very angry. But it was precisely because he had suffered so much that he had to resist. He wanted this unfilial son to enjoy the pain he had suffered. Now that he was neither human nor ghost, neither dead nor alive, of course, he wanted the young city lord to become like him. And he wanted to return it 1,000 times, 100 times, 10,000 times while maintaining his consciousness. Even if he had to pay a huge price, he wouldn't hesitate. He didn't know when this feud between father and son would end. Xiantian Shenzhen only removed a portion of the poison. The good show had just begun. And it was obvious that this interesting story wouldn't end for at least 1,000 years. There would be an end to the mutual torture of the father and son. After dealing with these small matters, Xiantian Shenzhen directly brought Qin Yu to a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Lava was everywhere here, but the strange thing was that the temperature was normal. It was even as warm as spring. Although there was fiery red lava everywhere, there were also many plants growing. There was even a patch of green, as if the two could coexist peacefully. You seem to have found all 3 major cities in Shinran in such a short time? Your progress is quite fast. If I'm not wrong, you're here for Yanli Shinran, right? Qin Yu collected 3 Shinran. He felt that his progress was only average. He wasn't dissatisfied, but he wasn't overjoyed either. However, it was clear that he would have to speed up the process. His strength had already broken through. There was no reason to waste time on the road. Kanshui Shinran, Sora Shinran, Qianjin Shinran. All they felt was a powerful aura. This powerful aura even made them feel some fear. Especially now that it was still in its infancy, although its future was limitless. But at least now, Qianjin Shinran was the weakest. Shenzhen was most wary of Xiantian. There was a huge difference between one true god and another true god. In particular, the division of realms was rather vague. Almost everyone's path was not the same. Some people barely improved, but it was only a lower level. Some people broke through easily, but they already had super strong strength. Obviously, Xiantian Shenzhen was the latter. Although his strength had just broken through, it was extremely powerful. Even Shinran had to admit. If they really fought, Xiantian Shenzhen might be better. Kanshui Shinran still hadn't forgotten why he signed the contract in a daze. Qin Yu's strength was extremely strong, making him helpless was one thing. Also, Xiantian Shenzhen was restraining him from the side, making him unable to move freely. At that time, Xiantian Shenzhen, who hadn't broken through yet, was able to affect him. Now that he had broken through, he was at least on the same level as him. Then, I naturally have to give you a gift after coming out of seclusion. Originally, I had already prepared a gift, but now I suddenly want to add something to this gift. Xiantian Shenzhen laughed heartily. The shadow of a large hand appeared in the sky. It slowly fell into the magma and continued to explore without any care. Xiantian Shenzhen suddenly clenched his fist. That shadow also clenched his fist. It pulled out a struggling little snake. Yanli Shinran had tried his best to hide, but he couldn't escape from this big hand. Shinran struggled and roared. Suddenly, it stretched and expanded, stretching for tens of thousands of miles, and kept growing. If someone raised their head, no matter where they were, they would be able to see Shenron's shadow. If it was closer, it would even cover the sky. There was not a trace of sunlight around. Only the almost endless dragon body could be seen. Under this incomparably huge body, Xiantian Shenzhen's figure seemed incomparably small. But his aura was extremely strong. At least standing under this shadow, he was equally eye-catching. Like a firefly in the dark night, it kept flashing. Countless gazes fell on him. Countless scorching magma appeared all over Yanli Shenron's body. It was not like the gentleness of the magma that floated on the surface at the beginning. All of them carried an extremely high temperature. If touched, one would die. But Xiantian Shenzhen still only gently grasped. The shadow of the hand in the void grew infinitely. Once again, Shinran, who had always been trying to escape, was caught in the palm of his hand as if he was holding a small insect. At this point, Yanli Shinran was completely unable to move. Under this strong pressure, he could only continue to shrink and shrink. He returned to the size when he was first caught. Although he was also 100 feet long, he was only the size of an ordinary dragon. It was not enough to cover the sky, and his aura was weak. Yanli Shinran looked at the group of people in front of him weakly. What do you want to do? I just want to quietly stay by myself. Compared to others, I am already extremely honest and dutiful. I sleep all year round and do my job well. Xiantian Shenzhen had no intention to argue with him about this. If he had great strength, why would there be so many questions? Your duty has nothing to do with me. I just want to take the gift you gave to my disciple as a gift. You can be dissatisfied because that will not affect the result. In the midst of intense unwillingness, Yanli Shunran had no choice but to force out a drop of his blood essence and force it to recognize him as its master. The group of Shunran who had long submitted felt a chill down their back. If they had been tactless in the beginning, would they have ended up like this? Even if they could resist for a while and escape, in the end they would all be captured in the end. As long as Qin Yu wanted to gather the 9 great Shinran, with such a master, he would be able to achieve his goal. Moreover, his talent was even more monstrous. Obviously, after breaking through to the true God realm, his strength would be heaven-defying. Chapter 1058. Xian Tian Shenzhen was very satisfied with the effect of his actions. Originally, he wanted to give these restless Shinran a good warning. Of course, he also wanted to use this opportunity to give them a decent gift. Coincidentally, Yanli Shenren's tracks were discovered by him. It could be said that he had bumped into him. Yanli Shunran did not know why he would suddenly be in trouble. But no one could give him an answer. Now that he had forced them to recognize him as their master, there was no room for regret. Qin Yu did not refuse. Originally, he wanted to gather the 9 great Shinran. Even if it was a help, it was also Xian Tian Shenzhen's care for him. It would not be good if he refused. After all, there were many Shinran, enough for him to practice. Previously, he had his master's help. But now, he did not need it anymore. His strength had increased again and again. Now, he was confident that he could single-handedly find Shinran. And he had a high chance of winning. Qin Yu, whose strength had already increased, quickly increased that drop of essence blood again. He directly rushed to the middle stage. And this strength was enough to look down on all heroes. The previous city lord was no threat to him. With his current strength, if he met the previous city lord of the underground city, he could destroy him in minutes. Not to mention a threat, he could not even be considered an opponent. After Yanli Shinran became Qin Yu's subordinate, he saw some of his former friends. Only then did he know that Qin Yu was the one who had defeated several great Shinran experts by himself. Thus, he calmed down and stopped thinking about how to resist. Originally, he could not resist Xian Tian Shenzhen. Now that he saw a few Shinran who were in the same situation as him, he had no intention to resist. Even if he wanted to resist, he wanted all of Shinran to resist. With his strength alone, not to mention resisting, he might not even be able to survive. With Xian Tian Shenzhen's strength, it was not difficult to kill him. Xian Tian Shenzhen and Xuelan waited for half a day. Qin Yu's strength had been raised to the middle stage. His realm was stable, and his aura was strong. It was only because the mysterious Sky Shenzhen was present that the aura didn't leak out. Therefore, very few people knew what was going on here. He thought that everything was peaceful, but he didn't know that there was another super expert standing at the peak of the world. Yanli Shinran was just a casual encounter. The real gift is this. I see that with your current rate of improvement, you'll be able to use this soon. A pure and flawless fruit appeared in Xiantian Shenzhen's hand. Then, the fruit split into 2, becoming 2 of similar size. Furthermore, the aura of the fruit had also fused into 1. One could tell at a glance that this fruit was no ordinary fruit. There were also some fine lines on it that were faintly discernible. Only a few people could tell how many lines there were on it. Those who were able to see these patterns were all extremely talented. Of course, those who were able to stand at the top were all extremely talented. But even so, they could clearly see how many lines there were on the fruit. What kind of pattern did these lines change? The entire 9-fold God realm added together could only do it with one hand. Xiantian Shenzhen and Qin Yu could see all the details on it without any hindrance, as well as those fine lines that couldn't be seen in the eyes of others. This fruit seems to contain some of the principles of heaven and earth. The lines on it are like ancient words. It must have an extraordinary origin, and there's also a faint trace of the aura of a great tribulation. Qin Yu recognized that this fruit must have something to do with Xiantian Senzen's breakthrough, but he couldn't tell what it was for the time being. The heavenly tribulation fruit only existed in legends, and there were only some records, and there were no pictures of the real thing. Nowadays, it was almost impossible to recognize the heavenly tribulation fruit. Only Xiantian Senzen knew what the heavenly tribulation fruit looked like. After all, this fruit grew bit by bit under his gaze. Naturally, he knew very well what it was in his hand. It can only increase the success rate of passing the tribulation. With this fruit, it can help the two of you lay a solid foundation. The so-called immediately was to communicate with heaven and earth and bear the power of all things in one's body. To be able to bear the power of God. To be able to cross this hurdle in one fell swoop. Although it seemed dangerous, it wasn't completely without a shortcut. If one learned one of the two major powers of time and space, one could gain an advantage. If one continuously refined one's body in advance, one could also increase the success rate. It was just that one of the two required luck, and the other required great perseverance. But the heavenly tribulation fruit was different. It contained a trace of God's power, and it was extremely gentle. This was also a supreme shortcut. Countless people wanted to get this fruit, but there was no way to find it. Almost everyone who wanted to break through to the true God realm wished they could use all their wealth and even their lives in exchange for this fruit, because as long as they had this fruit they might succeed in breaking through. They would obtain endless years of life. They would truly be able to look down on the heavens and break through all the void. This was something that no one could resist. If he held up such a fruit, Xiantian Senzen could even exchange it for countless loyal subordinates. With this fruit as a reward, it could cause chaos in the world and countless people would die on the battlefield. It depended on how to use it. Qin Yu refused such a powerful cheating tool without the slightest hesitation. Just now, he didn't know what it was, so he was prepared to accept it. But now that he knew, he could directly reject it with a smile. Because he never needed the help of any external object. With his strength, with his talent, it was only a matter of time before he broke through to the true God realm. It was the same whether there was external help or not. Since that was the case, why would he take this fruit? Anyway, this is a gift from Master to you. You may not need it, but you can give it to Xuelan. Xiantian Senzen smiled slightly and looked back and forth between the two of them. Xuelan's face, which had always been clear and flawless, turned pink. Then, Xiantian Senzen didn't say anything more. He directly threw the heavenly calamity fruit into Qin Yu's hands. It steadily fell into Qin Yu's hands. This matter was temporarily over. Anyway, he couldn't get back what he had given away. No matter what Qin Yu would do with this fruit, he didn't care. Even if it was to cause chaos in the world, as long as Qin Yu wanted. So what if he really caused chaos in the world? He was Xiantian Senzen's proudest disciple. In this world, he could naturally do whatever he wanted, and no one could stop him. No one had the qualifications to stop him. As long as he, the master, stood behind him, he would unconditionally support his disciple. Everyone who went against his disciple was also his enemy. Thank you, master. Qin Yu accepted it safely. Chapter 1059. An expert had broken through to true God realm. This news seemed to have grown wings and spread from an unknown place. In an instant it spread to all places. Everyone in the ninefold God realm learned of this news. No one was able to suppress their curiosity. They were all shocked and wanted to find out the identity of the mysterious expert. But they were disappointed. Only in the flame world there was a thread of information, but it was just a thread. No one was sure if the expert that had appeared once was him or not. That peerless expert that had broken through to true God realm. because just an instant was not enough to prove anything. Many people put this matter aside for the time being. Then they did their best to find Xian Tianzen's whereabouts. If they could get some experience and guidance, they would pay any price. Of course, at the same time, some people were being pursued by countless people. These people all held a ripe fruit in their hands. It was different from the heaven tribulation fruit. Once the earth tribulation fruit ripened, there would be a dozen fruit. Everyone present at the time had more or less taken one. Among them, the strongest had even obtained 2 fruit. After that, they scattered. But the news was still leaked. It was a person who was carelessly captured. The news he leaked betrayed everyone else. But in the end, he still died. The entire ninefold god realm was shocked. That was a legendary treasure that could increase the chances of breaking through. Who did not want to get it? Especially those old monsters who were nearing the end of their lifespans and were about to die. They wanted this treasure the most to help them break through. Only by breaking through to a higher realm could they have the strongest power. Only then could they break away from their current inhuman state. Even Shenzhen had a fixed lifespan. However, compared to ordinary people, it was unknown how many times more it was. As powerful experts, they were all old monsters who had lived for tens of thousands of years. He also wanted to obtain this supreme treasure the most. The treasure was their last hope. Naturally, no one was willing to let go of this hope. In order to achieve this goal, they all acted. Countless experts came out of seclusion. The present situation was chaotic. Even if the true heaven tribulation fruit had not appeared, and the true owner of the heaven tribulation fruit had not appeared, the world was still in chaos. Someone wanted to break through. These people who wanted to break through all wanted to use external objects to increase their chances of breaking through. If he had the guts to break through without the help of external objects, then he would be able to do so. He wouldn't have wasted so much time until he was on the brink of death before he saw a glimmer of hope. And among these old monsters, there were actually many people that Xian Tianzen's was familiar with. Looking at them, they were all dogs biting each other. Since he was fighting over a few earth tribulation fruits, he laughed heartily. In any case, he was just going to sit on the mountain and watch the tiger fight, so why should he interfere? But soon, he couldn't smile anymore. Seeing those experts fighting to the death over a few fellows, Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. Qin Yu had another idea in his mind. Was there any better time to train than now? At the center of those experts, countless sand was blown away. A chaotic battle. The majestic power could shatter mountains, rivers, and seas. If he could gain a foothold in that place, he would be able to compete with countless experts to determine victory or defeat. Wouldn't that be the best experience? Moreover, the appearance of experts would often cause countless changes. It would be best if he could use this chaos to increase his strength. You have to know that those places are very chaotic. If you are besieged, these old monsters all have their own trump card. They have lived for nearly 100,000 years. Which one of them doesn't have countless trump cards in their hands? You can't kill them or beat them. Listen to me. Don't get involved this time. What's so fun about these people? Why don't you go to other places? Maybe you can find something interesting. But Qin Yu had already made up his mind. Even Xian Tianzen's couldn't stop him. Since he had already made up his mind, no one could stop him. Moreover, there were many dangers in those chaotic places. Only then could he increase his strength. Let his strength continue to increase. It wasn't to increase his realm, but to increase his combat experience. Just as Xian Tianzen's said, those old monsters all had countless trump cards. It just so happened that it was perfect for the trial. Otherwise, he was worried that his strength would increase too quickly, and these people wouldn't be able to let him fight to his heart's content. Fight to his heart's content. Seeing that Qin Yu had indeed made up his mind, Xian Tianzen's didn't say anything else and just let him go. Anyway, with his master around, no matter what happened, he could quickly rush over. Moreover, to be honest, those old monsters are more powerful than Qin Yu. They only had the trump cards accumulated over countless years. If one really counted, whether it was talent or strength, they might not be as strong as Qin Yu. At least in that place, Qin Yu wouldn't encounter any danger. This was enough. Xiantian Shenzhen didn't say anything else and let Qin Yu go. At the crucial moment, he gave him a small jade pendant. It was only the size of a palm, but it could block attacks below the true god level. As long as one didn't reach the true god level, they wouldn't be able to break through the defense. This was indeed an extremely precious item, even if Xiantian Shenzhen wanted to polish such a jade pendant. It would also take a lot of effort. Not to mention other people. They couldn't break the defense of this jade pendant at all. It was just that Qin Yu was confident in his own strength, and he knew what level his strength had reached. This jade pendant was just SOSO to him. But if Xuelan wanted to go with him, this jade pendant couldn't be more suitable. At least it could prevent someone from sneaking an attack on Xuelan at the crucial moment. He could also let go of his fists and feet without any worries. Xuelan naturally decided to follow Qin Yu without the slightest hesitation. Xiantian Shenzhen saw that the two of them were so close that they were inseparable wherever they went. He revealed a kind smile again. He wasn't prepared to interfere with the happiness of the younger generation. Since Qin Yu had made his own decision, he wasn't prepared to interfere. Of course, he had already done what he could do as a master. He secretly left a tracking talisman on Qin Yu's body. It was extremely small and difficult to discover. This was to ensure Qin Yu's safety. If he encountered any powerful forces, this tracking talisman would immediately send Qin Yu's location to him. He could immediately break through the void and rush over. So no matter what, he couldn't continue to stop him. Since he had already made all the preparations, he had no fear. Go, I knew I couldn't keep you. Even with my current realm, you will be able to surpass it soon. Chapter 1060. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Xiantian Shenzhen had always known how outstanding his disciple was. If it wasn't for that accident in the middle, the disciple that he was most proud of should have achieved what he had today. It was a pity that he wasted another 10,000 years. That was the thing that hurt him the most, but it seemed that he had put in a lot of effort. Qin Yu's temperament was stronger, and it was easier for him to break through later. He didn't know if it was good or bad. Of course, Qin Yu's own efforts were absolutely indispensable for him to achieve what he had today. The effort that he put in was absolutely unimaginable for ordinary people. Talent was extremely important, but along the way, he had also experienced many dangers and obtained countless opportunities. No matter when, I'm the disciple that you can proudly say out loud. Before Qin Yu left, he bowed to Xiantian Shenzhen. With such a disciple, he had no regrets in his life. The little bit of sadness in Xiantian Shenzhen's eyes completely disappeared without a trace. With everything that he had now, there was no need to be sad at all. On the contrary, he should be proud to have such an outstanding disciple. Indeed, as Qin Yu said, he could proudly shout out loud. With such a sentence, he was already satisfied. After Qin Yu left, Xiantian Shenzhen couldn't help but stroke his beard. Looking at the backs of Qin Yu and Xuelan as they left, he sighed with emotion. How can there be such an outstanding person in this world? His character, talent, strength, and luck have all reached the highest level. But such an outstanding person is my disciple, Xiantian Shenzhen. Although he should be called Divine Venerable Xiantian now. But after all, he had been Shenzhen for so many years. It wasn't easy to change his name in a short time. Xiantian Shenzhen's name was more widely known than the Divine Venerable's name. Many powerful people still remembered him, especially the group of old monsters in the middle of the chaos. Presumably, he wouldn't forget that he was once a brilliant and outstanding person. Back then, he had also roamed the ninefold divine world like Chinyu. He made countless friends and enemies, and after these 10,000 years, it was unknown how much they had grown. However, when Chinyu returned, he would have to consider whether or not to change his name. From then on, there was no Xiantian Senzin in this world, only Divine Master Xiantian. Seems like a divine venerable sounds more powerful. Divine Master Xiantian decided to change his name. In any case, his strength had already increased. To change or not to change. In the eyes of others, he had the strength of an ultimate god. The most chaotic place in Flame World was a group of volcanoes. There were countless volcanoes there, and if one broke through the ground they would see boiling lava. This was not the special place where Shinran lived. Although there was magma there, it could also be said to be a picturesque scenery. And here it was boiling hot. Everyone who came in felt as if they were placed in a steamer. It was as if it would be cooked in the next moment. But there were still many experts who chose this place as the place to fight. Although there was an endless amount of boiling magma here. But there was also vast power in the lava. The surroundings were desolate. Even if they fought, no one would be hurt. Thus, this place became the most suitable location for the competition. And one of the people who had the earth fruit escaped here. Originally, he wanted to use the harsh environment here to hide temporarily. He had a secret method that allowed him to temporarily hide in the lava. This way, no one would be able to find him. But there were still more experts than he had imagined. There were countless people who chased after him. Among them, there were many who were strong or had the same ability as him. Soon, the person who held the earth fruit died. He had died under the siege of countless people, losing his footing and falling into the lava. He died before he could even put up a struggle. Although there was some lingering fear, everyone's desire for the earth fruit surpassed everything. It was normal for people to die. In fact, all the survivors wished that everyone else would die. That would be the best. Only when everyone died would they be able to obtain the final victory. The fewer opponents there were, the more likely they were to get the earth fruit. That was supreme power. Who didn't want to get it? Everyone wanted to get that huge power to strengthen themselves. There was already a true god in this world. But who knew if they would become the only two true gods after getting this fruit? With this thought, countless people began to fight over it. For a fruit, they almost broke their heads and even shed all pretenses of cordiality. Former friends could turn against each other and become enemies. These old monsters who had long been indifferent to kinship were even more willing to pay any price. They could even sacrifice their own disciples and grand-disciples without hesitation. And those who claimed to be righteous also shamelessly tried to snatch it. But the current situation didn't allow them to suppress others with their power, because they were surrounded by experts who were almost as strong. In this chaotic situation, there was suddenly one more person. No one would care. If there was someone here, they would just look at this man who suddenly appeared with vigilance. They wouldn't think about where this person came from. At this time, they were in a killing frenzy. Other than themselves, everyone was an enemy. Looking at this somewhat absurd scene, Qin Yu Jiao felt that it was funny. If they were to find out that all of this was fake, the so-called earth fruit had been taken away long ago. However, these were only the earth calamity fruits. While they had similar effects to the earth tribulation fruit, they also had a chance of failure. Maybe they could be used to improve themselves, but they definitely couldn't increase their chances of breaking through. The difference in effects between the two was like heaven and earth. This was the origin of the names of these two fruit. It was a pity that these people were confused and confused. They even mistook the fake for the real one. Because of this, they were completely shameless. The three famous leaders of Flame World had arrived. Originally, there had been a hidden powerful faction, the Underground City. This was the most powerful faction. But recently, there had been some disturbances in the underground city. The city master didn't have the mood to fight for it. Right now, he owed Xian Tianshenzhen a great favor. At least half of his life belonged to Xian Tianshenzhen. Of course, he wouldn't fight for it. His strength had reached a critical point. It didn't matter if he had it or not. Even more, he had experienced being refined into a puppet. The city master also desired strength, but he wasn't stubborn. Chapter 1061. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The biggest force didn't interfere in this matter. The remaining 3 experts gathered together. They had been in seclusion for several years. They were the legendary old monsters. On the surface there were many experts, but only they could be called the real peerless experts. At this moment, they gathered together just to snatch a fruit that was as big as their palm. If they could get it, they might be able to break through to a higher realm. They would completely break the balance and look down on the world. The onlookers didn't have the guts to snatch it directly. But they hoped that the 3 giants would be able to fight until all 3 were injured. Then, they would definitely have a chance, although the possibility was very low. Everyone hoped that they were the lucky ones who stepped on dog shit. A person came with a saber. The murderous aura on his body was extremely domineering. Wherever he passed, everyone was pushed to the side by a powerful force. Everyone was no exception. From the perspective of the 3 giants, it was as if the crowd had automatically opened a path for this person. How about letting me join in? Fight with me. If I win, you don't want the spirit fruit. If one of you wins, the fruit will belong to him. The 3 giants looked at each other warily. They knew each other too well. They even knew what each other's trump cards were. If they really fought under such circumstances, no one could really gain the upper hand. It was even possible that the weak people standing next to them would take advantage of them for no reason. This was definitely a situation that no one wanted to see. But now, a stranger suddenly appeared. Just like the conditions that Qin Yu said, they were already very good for them. Qin Yu suddenly said such words at this time, which just happened to give them a choice. And Qin Yu didn't want the extremely precious spirit fruit in their eyes. Then this deal wasn't impossible. If Qin Yu went back on his word, the 3 of them would naturally join hands. No matter what kind of background Qin Yu had, the 3 of them were old monsters who hadn't been born for countless years. With the trump cards in their hands, could it be that they couldn't protect a fruit? After hesitating for a moment, everyone nodded in agreement. He didn't know what Qin Yu's purpose was. However, it wasn't as if they hadn't heard of it before. Some people just liked to look for opponents everywhere. Clearly, no one was stronger than them now. The intense battle intent on Qin Yu's body caused them to be even more certain of their guess. For such people, just one battle with them was enough. It didn't matter whether he won or lost. Qin Yu finally showed a slight smile. It was indeed as they had guessed. It didn't matter whether he won or lost. The most important thing was whether anyone was willing to fight with him. This time, he was only here to temper himself, and the results were not important. As long as he could make a breakthrough and accumulate combat experience, that would be enough. These people's thoughts were not within his consideration. Come on then. The dominating heaven blade fell into his hands and unleashed its full power. The domineering power made people not dare to look directly at it. Those who were weaker to begin with retreated even further away. Only then did he dare to watch this battle directly. When the 3 giants felt the strong suppression, they couldn't help but show a look of horror. Even they had to treat this opponent who suddenly appeared with caution. Of course, only Qin Yu with such strength was qualified to be the judge who could get the spirit fruit. As long as they could defeat Qin Yu first, they would be able to get the final victory. However, things would really go as they wished. They would successfully defeat Qin Yu. The 3 of them had the same thought. They thought that it was only a matter of time. The only difference was who would be defeated first, who would get the final victory. However, they didn't think about whether they would be defeated one day. Golden scales like the sea. Mayfly startles the sky. Change to the east. Amnesty. The three of them attacked at the same time. Their power was monstrous. Qin Yu stood under the attacks from three sides. His expression didn't change. The dominating heaven blade in his hand was slightly raised. There were no fancy moves. He blocked the three forces one after another. It looked very easy. Then, he pushed forward slightly. The combined strength of the three people couldn't do anything to Qin Yu. At this moment, the three giants vaguely felt that something was wrong. With their reputations, if they were defeated by a nameless person, they would definitely be defeated. One could imagine how big a blow it would be to them. They attacked again. This time, they didn't care about face. They took out their trump cards in one breath. They just wanted to win. Their real goal was to be able to hold the heavenly tribulation fruit in their hands. They could truly see through the secrets of heaven and step into the realm of a true God. They could be respectfully called Divine Lord by everyone, and this plan couldn't be disrupted by anyone. The three of them were extraordinarily powerful when they worked together. Although each of them was wary of the other, they dared to use any despicable move. They increased the strength of the same move and brought out their highest strength. They threw some hidden weapons in the dark, wanting to succeed in a sneak attack. As long as the sneak attack succeeded, the final balance of victory would be tilted to them. The dragon soul that hadn't appeared for a long time. It blocked all the attacks in the dark as soon as it attacked. As for those attacks that appeared to be on the surface, they were all directly blocked by Qin Yu. Under such strong pressure, he was still able to stand steadily. All the bones in his body made a crisp sound because of the great pressure. However, he wasn't angry. Instead, he was happy. What he wanted was such a strong pressure. Otherwise, how could he be promoted? Ordinary opponents were no longer in his eyes. Only this kind of pressure could make him feel so carefree and unrestrained. Your strength is not bad, but it's a pity that you're not an honorable person. Even though Qin Yu was under enormous pressure, he still had a relaxed expression on his face. He even spoke with confidence. The three of them felt fear in their hearts at the same time. However, they didn't know where this fear came from. It's time to end it. Annihilation, divine thunder. The huge destructive aura merged with the domineering and fierce intent of the dominating heaven blade. It came with an irresistible deterrence. The three giants were sent flying one after another, smashing into a deep pit. Their internal organs were shaken. They spat out a mouthful of blood and could no longer stand up. They often had to recuperate, and they didn't know how long it would take. Originally, they were a group of old fellows resting, and it wouldn't be easier for them to recover than ordinary people. Suddenly, they were seriously injured at this juncture. Obviously, the heavenly tribulation fruit was definitely not fated with them. For a moment, they hated Qin Yu. At the same time, they were shocked by how he had such powerful strength. Even the few of them together couldn't pose a threat to him. Which corner of the world did this peerless monster pop out from? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.